Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Sign in for 3 years, starting from Capturing the Goddess. Chapter 61. The sudden sonic attack caused Ning Luo's mind, who was caught off guard, to swell up suddenly. His eyes swept across the faces of these young and beautiful female students. Looking at their surprise expressions, Ning Luo found that Xiao Yu seemed to be the interpersonal relationship in the college is very good. "Oh, please, can you be more reserved?" Xiao Yu said helplessly as he couldn't laugh or cry and pushed away a few friends who kept sticking to him. I haven't seen you for 2 months. I'm a lot plump. Tell me honestly, don't you? Ha. A woman with a beautiful face secretly touched her palm on Xiao Yu's chest, and then applied it to Xiao Yu's incense. On the shoulder, jokingly said. Aside, Ning Luo sighed helplessly, looked at Xiao Yu's gaze, somehow strange, you friends. Why are they all like female perverts? Go away, don't make waves with me. The pretty face flushed and pushed the woman in her arms away, looking at another woman who was about to pounce on it. Xiao Yu hurriedly stepped back, pointed at Ning Luo and the others, and hurriedly introduced them, and only then separated the thoughts of these women from molesting. What a beautiful little beauty. His eyes swept over Zuner and Nalan Yanran, and the two women were surprised by their outstanding appearance. His gaze slowly shifted to Ning Luo, who was aside. As for Xiao Ning, because of the relationship with Xiao Yu's siblings, these women were fortunate to ignore the past. At this time, these women all looked at Ning Luo. Ning Luo's face value has risen in a straight line, very handsome, and now that Ning Luo is 15 or 6 years old, he is also very tall, and his age and his heart adds a bit of charm to Ning Luo. So when Ning Luo came, they all caught their eyes. So handsome little handsome guy. Isn't this the Ning Luo you talk about in your dreams every day, isn't it? You really look so handsome, no wonder dreams of you every day. Listening to these women's conversations, Ning Luo couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth slightly, and looked at Xiao Yu's gaze, which became more and more weird. Whoever dreams of him in a dream, don't talk nonsense. Xiao Yu listened to the women's teasing, and quickly explained. Her pretty face was full of shame and helplessness. Just when she was about to explain, in the corner of his eye, he saw a figure of a man. Was hurriedly walking towards this side. Get the moon first near the water tower, you don't want it, we have to do it. At this time, a woman said. Who said me? After speaking out, Xiao Yu realized that he seemed to have said something wrong. We don't know you yet. Come on, is it related to him when you are getting older? A woman asked again. Okay, don't talk nonsense. We really don't have anything. The pretty face changed slightly, and Xiao Yuliu frowned slightly. Immediately unfolding, a shy blush appeared on his cheeks. Seeing them like this, Zuner immediately looked at Xiao Yu very vigilantly. It seems that I must not only guard against Nalan Yanran, but also against Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu, long time no see. Just when everyone was in a daze, a man's voice suddenly sounded. Listening to the voice, everyone turned their heads. A young man in a gray shirt was standing behind him with a smile on his face. The young man looked quite handsome, but the brilliant smile always made Ning Luo feel a little false. He heard the jokes of those women, saying that Xiao Yu was calling Ning Luo's name in his dream, so he was full of resentment towards Ning Luo. The shyness on Xiao Yu's cheeks slowly receded, turned around, glanced at the young man, and said faintly, Rob, long time no see. He smiled and nodded. He was called the young man of Lobudi. He looked casually into Ning Luodi's pupils, and a hint of chill and anger flashed vaguely. He likes Xiao Yu, so how can he not be angry when others say about Xiao Yu and other men? Did you bring these people? Rob came up with a smile, and Rob asked with a smile. Yeah, nodded casually. Xiao Yu introduced Ning Luo and the others again and smiled. I brought them over for the test. Rob smiled slightly, and looked at Ning Luo with some gloomy eyes. Rob was very resentful. He looked at Ning Luo viciously. Sternly said in a voice that only oneself can hear, Hey, a little white face, see if I can teach you a lesson. Then he changed his face instantly, smiled and nodded, took out a fist-sized red crystal ball from his arms, raised it, and smiled. Just now Teacher Ruoline gave me a test crystal, so let them try. Well, all the other test crystals have been taken to the previous test channel. If you don't use mine, you will have to wait for a while. Hearing that, Xiao Yu hesitated a little before nodded, turning his head to explain to Ning Luo softly, this test crystal is very simple. As long as the strength reaches the 8 stages of fighting energy, it will automatically light up. That way, you pass the preliminary test. Zuner, you try first. Ning Luo smiled at Zuner. Smiled and nodded. Zuner and Nalan Yanran, Xiao Ning and the 3 took the lead, and their palms stayed on the crystal ball for a while. After the crystal ball glowed, he returned. Seeing the success of the 3, Ning Luo also touched it casually, achieving the same effect. Don't worry, if you don't reach the passing boundary, I won't make my own way to bring them in. Xiao Yu said lightly as the 4 people succeeded. Haha, it's not that you don't believe you, it's just the rules. At Xiao Yu, he smiled apologetically. Rob put away the crystal ball, pointed his finger at the men and women sitting on the ground under the scorching sun, and smiled at Ning Luo. Congratulations on passing the preliminary test. Now, please invite a few to stay outside for half an hour. Rob, what do you mean? Xiao Yuliu raised his eyebrows and shouted with frosty face. Xiao Yu, you are also a veteran student. You should know that this is the rule of admission, haha. Now the new students are getting more and more impetuous, so when they are admitted, their spirit will be frustrated, which will benefit their future life in the college. Rob laughed. HMPH, Rob, you say this to those ignorant freshmen. I don't bother to care about you, but you don't use these bad rules on the people I bring. Xiao Yu said coldly. This is the rule. The corner of Rob's mouth twitched, and Xiao Yu yelled at him so shamelessly in front of everyone that it made him feel a little angry and sour. Rob, you still don't make trouble. In fact, you also know that these rules are nothing but this. Why do you make this? The girls next to him. It's also a bit uncomfortable with this guy's gesture of holding a chicken feather as an arrow. Cannot help but frown. Hee, I'm sorry. They passed the test in my hands. According to the regulations, during this period of time, I should temporarily rule them. Rob smiled brilliantly, looking at Xiao Yu and getting angry again. His voice suddenly changed. Well, for your sake, they don't have to go out all, just let one person represent it. Ah, let me see, just let this little brother go out. Ha ha, anyway, a big man doesn't have to be afraid of getting tanned. Quote. Rob's fingers moved slowly over several people, and finally stopped in front of Ning Luo with a smile. Ning Luo raised his eyes lightly, and looked at the smiling young man in front of him faintly. Get away, Ning Luo won't go out, I will go to teacher Ruolin and say, I don't need you to point fingers here. The ***** long legs stepped forward, Xiao Yu stood in front of Ning Luo, and said coldly. Oh, brother Rob, there seems to be something wrong with you. Just as a few people were entangled, a group of men gushing out in the shadow of the tent grinning. It's nothing, it's just that this freshman doesn't want to go out for sun exposure. Rob installed the crystal ball and smiled casually. Hey, it's been a long time since I met such an arrogant new student, brother Rob, do you need our help? Hearing this, a young man with a gold star painted on his chest smiled at Rob, with a hint of flattery in his smile. Nodded with a smile, Rob looked at Xiao Yu with a gloomy face, and he groaned a little, then smiled suddenly. Well, if you don't go out, you won't go out, but after all, there are so many new students outside watching. I'm afraid that others will feel unwilling to go out for the sun. With that, Rob patted the shoulder of the young man next to him, and smiled at Ning Luo. Since you don't want to go out, then you can discuss with Jayla. Of course, you don't need to beat him, as long as you can hold on for 20 rounds in your hands, that's fine. Hearing the words, the women beside Xiao Yu suddenly got angry at Rob. Looking at the current situation, they also understood that this guy was eating Ning Luo's jealousy, and he was planning to avenge his personal revenge. Compared with the other women's anger, Xiao Yu was strangely silent, turned his head slightly, and stared at Ning Luo. She knew Ning Luo's current strength, and against a one-star fighter, she would directly beat a one-star fighter. Die. If people are killed, Ning Luo and the others will not be able to enter Canaan College. So Xiao Yu must stop. Wait a minute, I don't think it is necessary anymore. Xiao Yu said quickly. When Xiao Yu said that, Rob and CJ thought they were afraid, so their attitude became even more arrogant. Boy, You are still not a man, and you still want to hide behind a woman. CJ pointed at Ning Luo. Ning Luo stared faintly at Rob, who was full of smiles in front of him, and a little bit of chill passed through his pitch-black eyes. He didn't want to be troubled, but this guy just wanted to fight against others. Hey, come on, boy, let me teach you how to respect the senior, otherwise we will suffer a loss in the college in the future, and we will have to blame. The young man named Jayla stepped forward and faced Ning Luo. Smiled kindly. Slowly let out a sigh of relief. Under the gaze of everyone, Ning Luo shrugged helplessly, took 2 steps forward, and when he reached Xiao Yu's side, he leaned into Xiao Yu's ear and said, I can beat them. Die. At this time, Xiao Yu shook his head quickly and said, No, he is from Canaan College. If you kill him, you won't be able to enter Canaan College. Ning Luo thought about it, and he still has to enter Canaan Academy to get the fire. If I kill them, it will be a bit of trouble, so I can't kill them for the time being. Seeing Ning Luo leaning close to Xiao Yu's ear, Rob's expression was instantly gloomy when the nearby girls were stunned again. He turned his head and said inwardly to Jayla, Come on. Hearing this, Jay Layan smiled and nodded. Ning Luo slowly stepped forward, looked at CJ and Rob faintly, and smiled, If you guys kneel down and beg for mercy now, I can consider doing it lightly. As soon as this statement came out, except for a few people who knew the realm of Ning Luo, everyone looked at Ning Luo dumbfounded. Does this kid don't want to live anymore? So arrogant. Boy, don't use your tongue, let's talk about it with real skills. CJ angrily said, and he was about to rush to fight Ning Luo. Wait a minute, Ning Luo said immediately. Why, I'm afraid, want to ask for mercy. CJ sneered and looked at Ning Luo. Ning Luo smiled slightly, and pointed to Rob. You too, lest I do it one by one, troublesome. Hearing Ning Luo say this, Rob's heart was suddenly very angry. This kid is too capable of pretending. A freshman dared to be so arrogant, he didn't pay attention to their seniors at all. How can he bear with such a stinky boy? Boy, since you want to die, I'll be blamed for you. Rob said, and slowly walked to Ting Ji's side. At this time, the women who didn't know the realm of Ning Luo were very anxious, and looked at Xiao Yu and said, Hurry up and stop him, otherwise it won't be good if you get hurt. Xiao Yu helplessly spread his hand and said, You have seen it too, I stopped it, it's useless. These women have a very good affection for Ning Luo. One important reason is that Ning Luo is handsome. That's right, Ning Luo is more handsome than everyone here. In front of Ning Luo, any thorn in Gorub is scum. For such a handsome little brother, these women don't want him to be injured. Looking at the slowly coming Ning Luo, Jay Lag smiled. He saw a lot of this kind of thorny new students, but in the end most of them didn't end well. It is almost an unwritten rule of Canaan College to frustrate freshmen when enrolling students. After all, people who can reach the admission limit are generally considered talented. This kind of person, usually in that small place of his own home, should be said to be pampered and ridiculed, and he rarely receives any ridicule. With this mentality, he enters the Canonian College where there are almost endless outstanding people. It is easy to say nothing. Fighting hard finally caused some unnecessary troubles. Therefore, at the time of enrollment, it is a very important and realistic problem to let the new students clearly understand their own level and to grind away their newborn calf agility. As for this unwritten rule, even some of the instructors at Canaan College did not hold an objection. Therefore, this rule has always been followed. And this kid is going to challenge himself and Rob, this is undoubtedly announcing death. You have to know that you are a 1-star fighter, while Senior Rob is a 4-star fighter. A freshman who just passed the test wants to challenge them both. Snort. Then let him accept the severe beating from society. His fist was tight, and a faint vindictive spirit covered it. Jay Lag smiled. When he first entered the Canaan Academy, he had resisted with his talent. The senior who had the strength of the 2-star fighter at the time, only punched him, which made him run out for half an hour in the sun. And with this kind of shame that he has experienced personally, every time he sees a new student, Jayla has a kind of pleasure to tear his spirit apart. Ning Luo stood quietly, waiting for Rob and Thorn to come up. Standing next to Xiao Yu, Shui Ni recalled Xiao Yu's previous evaluation of Ning Luo, blinked her bright eyes, and stared curiously at the young man who had always maintained a calm smile. She wanted to know. This boy named Ningluodi is really as strong as Xiao Yu said. Pursed her rosy lips, Shui Ni put her hands around her chest, a pair of deep-set groove marks were compressed, and a look of anticipation flashed in her eyes. The blush on Xiao Chao's face hasn't completely faded away, she looks extremely alluring. Xiao Yu stretched out his arms lazily. The pair of chests that weren't too majestic, but the outlines stood proudly. Yu Shou opened the blue silk in front of her forehead. She glanced at the young man's back. She felt very deep in her heart. Clearly, Thorge and Rob are in bad luck. Looking at the two people who were about to fight in the tent, the 24 freshmen outside under the scorching sun also cast their curious eyes. Before choosing to bask in the sun, they did not resist, but they resisted. Without exception, was suppressed by force by the seniors whose strength was far better than them. Now they saw that there were people who wanted to challenge the authority of these seniors, and they were happy to have a schadenfreude mentality. Watch how others make a fool of yourself. Boy, are you ready? I really enjoyed the feeling of being watched. Zhe Lao's face became more and more intense, his narrow eyes swept across Ning Luo, and he smiled. Rob also condensed the resentment in his heart on his fist, and walked towards Ning Luo step by step. Let's start. Ning Luo raised his chin. The sound is flat, let everyone stunned. Hey, the kid has a very good mentality. To Ning Luo's attitude, Jayla and Rob were slightly surprised. Immediately, my heart surged with anger. Can this be regarded as discriminating against yourself? Exhaled lightly, Ning Luo didn't bother to talk nonsense again, lazily staring at the other's face with a little anger. Very good, the other side is calm. Undoubtedly, de Jayla's self-esteem was a little hurt. Sneered, the body leaned forward suddenly. Right fist clenched. On it, vindictive condensed. Immediately brought up a burst of energy. He blasted away at Ning Luo's head fiercely. Everyone around. See Jayla deal with a freshman. It used such a huge force. Can't help but frown. Raised his eyelids lightly, looking at the fist that was rapidly expanding in the pupils. Ning Luo shook his head slightly, and before the fist was about to come into the body, the palm of his hand was gently pushed out. Boom! There was a loud noise, and immediately, I saw the body of Ting Jie flew out, smashed to the ground fiercely, and a mouthful of blood rushed into his mouth. At this moment, the audience fell silent, and a freshman was able to fly a senior of a one-star fighter directly. And it only took one blow. How can this be? Therefore, all those women were dumbfounded and stood still, and the new students were even more surprised. Rob, who was still full of smiles, looked at this scene, his face slowly gloomy, his eyes were full of chills and stared at the smiling young boy. It seems that this time he seems to have missed his eyes, this kid unexpectedly some strength. Asshole, looking for death. At this time, Rob rushed up. Ting Jie was defeated, his face is very shameless, so he has to do it himself to get his face back. At this time, Rob's vindictiveness continued to gather, and he looked at Ning Luo fiercely and said, "Kid, let me teach you a lesson." As he said, Rob was condensed with vindictiveness in his hand and punched Ning Luo. His face was indifferent. Ning Luo's idle left hand, like a mosquito, was thrown off at will, and finally he slapped Rob on the face. Snapped. With a loud noise, Rob was slapped severely by Ning Luo. Suddenly, Rob was slapped and flew out by Ning Luo, a mouthful of blood spurted out, and 2 teeth flew out. The severe pain on his face made Darab feel ashamed. He stood up slowly, the anger on his face became more frantic, his right foot bounced on the ground, his figure rushed into the air with force, and a violent spin. On his right leg, a faint cyan vindictive spirit emerged. An illusory light resembling a wind blade covered his legs, and finally cut down against the top of Ning Luo's head fiercely. Shameless, I used all the scenery blade. This is a yellow level advanced fighting skill. This guy is too shameless. Looking at the fuzzy light blade on Rob's leg, a group of girls suddenly shouted with anger, "Road!" Looking at Rob's actions, Xiao Yuliu's eyebrows were also slightly furrowed, but even after unwinding, Ning Luo was the man who ruined the Garli family. She didn't believe how much damage this guy could cause Ning Luo. Raised his face, slightly sharp wind, slowly raised his palm. Aiming at Rob who was falling down quickly. Go! His lips moved slightly, a faint voice, and he drank softly. fell with the shout. A fierce invisible energy violently rushed out of Ning Luo's palm, and finally hit Rob's chest, which was about to fall. Puff! Rob, with an inexplicable blow on the chest, with a cold face. His face suddenly turned pale, and after an instant, his figure shot up sharply, and a mouthful of blood spurted out wildly. Boom! After shooting for more than 10 meters, Rob slammed heavily on the hot stone ground. Rob's body twitched slightly, and his face was horrified as he looked at the young man with his palm outstretched, his chest. A dull, black eyes. Finally dizzy. From Rob's strong attack, to the sudden and inexplicable backward shot, it only took more than 10 seconds. And looked at this electric light flint room. After the victory and defeat were divided, the inside and outside of the tent remained silent almost invariably. A freshman defeated 2 seniors one after another, a 1-star fighter and a 4-star fighter. What kind of person can do this? Under the scorching sun, the freshman looked stupidly at Rob, who had fainted not far from him. After a while, their fiery eyes shifted to the young man standing in the shadows. This is the first time they have seen a freshman who can defeat the senior, and the age of this freshman seems to be a bit younger than them. So horrible. Several pretty-looking girls in the freshmen stared fiercely at the plain-faced teenager. There were almost admired stars beating in their eyes. If it weren't for this time, I'm afraid they would not help but scream twice. Vent the feelings of worship in your heart. Sure enough, a terrifying talent, so strong. His eyes fixed on Ning Luo. Shui Ni shook her head in surprise. The latter used facts, like her, to prove the authenticity of what Xiao Yu said earlier. What level of strength is this Ning Luo? Looks like this, it seems that you have already become a fighter. Looking at the black-shirted teenager, the girl next to Xiao Yu suddenly got a little nodded. Baba asked. A joke, it is easy to make a senior with more than 2 fighters look like this, and his strength is almost stronger than most people here. Xiao Yu smiled sweetly and stared at the young man in the field. An inexplicable splendor flashed in her eyes. After a while, she spread out her hands like Ning Luo and said with a smile, I don't know, but the strength seems to be higher than the fighting master. As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned. Fighter. That level they dare not even think about, how is this possible? Ning Luo didn't make any heavy moves, so Ting Jie and Rob were both awakened by the people from Canaan College. They were being helped over. Rob's face became more gloomy, his eyes were cold and he glanced at Ning Luo, his mouth twitched slightly. You don't need to go out now. Ning Luo glanced at Rob and said with a faint smile. Hee, my little brother really can't hide it. The gloom on his face gradually disappeared, and Rob again piled up a brilliant smile, stepped forward, patted Ning Luo on the shoulder as if affectionately, and sneered in a low voice, Boy, don't be too arrogant. Although you are a bit talented, Canaan Academy is better than you. I don't know how much you have. Your temper will suffer when you arrive at Canaan Academy. Thanks for the reminder. Smiling and nodding, Ning Luo smiled and said, but I believe, at least you don't have the qualifications. Ning Luo is not a fool. Rob's hostility towards him is very clear in his heart. Therefore, he doesn't need to act stupid in front of him. After all, even if he really wants to move, Ning Luo will not be afraid of him. This is not the first time I have done killing and destroying corpses. Although Rob's hostility towards him was due to a bit of misunderstanding, Ning Luo didn't take it easy to untie it. To put it bluntly, Rob was still not qualified. Hearing Ning Luo's unceremonious words, Rob's brilliant smile turned gloomy again, his eyes stared at Ning Luo with cold eyes, his face twitched slightly, and his pupils were stunned, as if he was about to cut Ning Luo with 1,000 swords. Ning Luo directly ignored this kind of useless eye offensive, and the indifferent smile on his delicate face was obviously easier to make people feel good than the other's forcibly pretending fake smile. Rampant kid, I will come to Canaan College in the future, senior I will take good care of you. Rob gritted his teeth and smiled coldly. Touched his face, Ning Luo whispered, I don't know other places, but if you pretend to be forced, believe it or not, I can make you unable to get out of Wudin City. Eye pupils shrank slightly, Rob's mouth twitched and stared at the young man in front of him, but he found a touch of indifference from the dark eyes. His body trembled without a trace. He stared at the indifferent dark eyes, and Rob felt a faint chill in his heart. This feeling was just like the brutal demon wolf he encountered alone during the last mission. In general, plus he was beaten badly by this kid, so even with the backing of Canaan College behind him, Rob was a little bit afraid of Ning Luo from his heart. Quietly swallowed, Rob's threatening words were swallowed abruptly. Very good. Taking a deep breath, Rob seemed to want to drive away the humiliating chill in his heart. He gritted his teeth and nodded at Ning Luo. He has made up his mind. Today's shame, when there is a chance in the future, we must invite someone to teach this kid well. Staring at Rob lightly, Ning Luo planned to find an opportunity to let this guy stay in Yutan City forever, so as to prevent unnecessary troubles in the future. Moreover, cutting grass and roots is Ning Luo's principle of doing things, so Ning Luo also made up his mind. At this moment, a gentle woman's voice that made Ning Luo's heart soften suddenly, but it chuckled softly in the tent. Hee, the little guy's talent is really good, it seems that I'm going to find a treasure this time. The sudden female voice was so gentle that it was almost intoxicating. Under this soft voice, surrounded by the concentration of Ning Luo, I couldn't help but lose consciousness. After a while, his eyes moved with the sound and looked towards the tent. Inside. In the shadow of the tent, a woman in green is standing smiling, a beautiful face with a gentle smile. Her eyes are flowing, looking at the soft eyes of everyone, like a clear stream of water quietly flowing from her heart. In general, people can't help but indulge in the gentleness and agility that is unique to women. The woman looks a little older than Xiao Yu and the others. She has a plump and exquisite figure, revealing a mature style that has been polished over time. This kind of natural style is far from the comparison of the young girls like Xiao Yu. Ning Luo's eyes swept over the woman. Although she was a little worse than Zuner or Xiao Yu than her appearance, Ning Luo's heart was filled with surprise for the gentle temperament that was not adulterated. The woman opposite explained the commendatory concept of a woman as water almost completely. After this woman appeared, Ning Luo could find that some of the young students inside the tent had their eyes quietly hot, and there was an inexplicable affection in their eyes when they looked at her. With this phenomenon, Ning Luo suddenly shook his head speechlessly. It seems that these guys have a crush on this woman, but this is not surprising. Some young people always like some mature woman. Well, this seems to be called a mature woman control. Teacher Ruolin, Yuer wants to kill you. Looking at the gentle woman who appeared inside the tent, Xiao Yu gave a cry of surprise, then rushed forward, grinning and hugging the latter's plump but not fat waist. Yuer, are you having a nice vacation? He held Xiao Yu in his arms. The gentle woman known as Ruolin's mentor said with a smile. Not bad. With a playful smile, Xiao Yu bit the delicate earlobe of teacher Ruolin and joked softly, the instructor is getting more and more gentle. If this continues, the instructor will look at the man in the future. Ru Shui is so sleepy. Her pretty face flew lightly and blushed. Instructor Ruolin shook her head helplessly. He patted Xiao Yudi's head in a petting manner. Immediately, he raised his chin to Ning Luo and the others. Softly said, did you bring the local people? It seems very good. Of course. He straightened his chest proudly. Ning Luo is about to sign in. What mysterious ability will he sign in for himself this time? Ning Luo looked forward to it. Sign in. Ning Luo did not hesitate, and shouted to sign in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully and getting the pupil of control. The pupil of control. What is this? Ning Luo asked in his heart. The controlled pupil can control others for a period of time after use. The controlled person will absolutely obey your orders. However, the controlled pupil also has limitations. The higher the mental power, the shorter the control time, which is better than the mental power. People who are too strong can't control it and can only exert spiritual influence. After listening to the introduction, Ning Luo understood what the pupil of control was doing. In other words, using the pupil of control, you can control a person whose mental power is lower than one's own or whose strength is similar to that of one's own, and they can be controlled by themselves as if they have become their own dolls. For people who are stronger than their own mental power, the pupil of control cannot control them, but can only influence them. However, Ning Luo is very confident in his spiritual power. First of all, he traveled here, carrying memories of 2 lifetimes, so his spiritual power is much stronger than ordinary people. Furthermore, he is now a 4th-rank alchemist, and spiritual power is essential for refining. It is very important to the pharmacist. Ningluo has practiced so many medicines, it has also greatly improved his mental power. Therefore, now Ningluo's mental power, almost no one in the same realm can surpass him, even if it is a person or two higher than his realm, his mental power is probably not as strong as him. So this skill is like a divine help to him. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully and obtaining the concealment method. The method of concealment can conceal the aura on your body, even if you are fighting sage, you can't see your cultivation. Ningluo was delighted. With the method of concealment, Ningluo was able to lower his cultivation base slightly. Otherwise, if the cultivation base is too high, I am afraid it will cause a lot of trouble. Ruolin let go of Xiao Yu. Slowly stepped forward, smiling at the dozens of freshmen below the hot sun. Everyone, come in. Heard her speak. Those freshmen who were sweating profusely in the hot sun. Suddenly he was full of joy. Sit up quickly. Embarrassedly rushed into the shadow of the tent. I have to say that although this method of discouraging newcomers is somewhat unsatisfactory, it still has a little effect. At least the newcomers entering the tent now are more arrogant than when they first arrived. Reprinted since it is obviously going to converge a lot, all of them are shrunk in the corners of the shadows, and their eyes are constantly sweeping inside the tent. With a soft smile, his eyes swept across the people. Instructor Ruo Lin finally stopped at Ningluo's face, smiled slightly, and said softly, Rob doesn't have a bad mind. He was just a little angry in his heart before. Behave a little bit recklessly, don't blame him. Hee hee. The tutor laughed. I am the kindest person, so how can I blame Senior Rob? Ningluo shook his head. Shy, smiled. Hearing that, most of the people in the tent rolled their eyes and laughed in their hearts. Doesn't this guy think that after unceremoniously knocking out a senior, it is ironic to say this again? Eyes were staring at the smiling young man in front of him. Instructor Ruolin blinked her slender eyelashes. She seemed to have a hunch in her heart. After being a tutor for so many years, she seemed to finally meet the most prickly student. After thinking about it, Teacher Ruolin shook her head, and ordered Rob and Sang to be limping to come. After frowning her eyebrows for a moment, Teacher Ruolin stretched out her white jade hand, and immediately in the enviable eyes of some male students, she lightly touched the arms of Jayla and Rob's, lightly aqua blue and gentle energy, smoothly. Passing his arm into the latter's body, he calmed down the chaotic fighting energy in his body and repaired some injuries caused by Ningluo. Water attribute Vindictive Qi is the mildest among the classification of Vindictive Qi. If there is no pill to heal injuries, water attribute Vindictive Qi is the most suitable choice to heal people. Therefore, water attribute Vindictive Qi is generally it is also called a healing medicine for activities. In many mercenary teams, members who have learned water attribute techniques are indispensable. After all, when a companion is seriously injured, only water attribute and wood attribute vindictiveness can get enough healing time for the wounded. Raising her eyes, Ruolin's tutor chuckled lazily. Dear students, congratulations to all of you for passing the prediction. Now it is considered as entering the gate of Canaan College, but because the college needs to distinguish the potential value of the students. So, I need to know your exact strength now. 8 segments of fighting spirit belong to the F-level potential value, which is the standard of Canaan Academy. 9 Duan Do Qi belongs to the E-level potential value. 1-star fighter, D level, 2-star fighter, C level. By analogy, the highest level S is the 5-star fighter. Of course, the age limit here is less than 20. Haha, a freshman with first level potential. Canaan Academy has only met one person in the past 10 years. Now that little demon girl is in the academy, but she is a bit amazing. She covered her red lips and smiled softly. Ruolin's slender eyelashes blinked gently, although I don't really expect to meet a little demon girl like that. However, it is satisfying to receive a B or C level. Speaking of this, Ruolin's gaze is Ruiorou sweeping towards Ningluo and Zuner. In her perception, within this tent, there are only these 2 people, giving her a kind of inability to see clearly. Feeling inexplicably, within her prediction, the potential value of the 2 people, perhaps at least not lower than the C level. In fact, Ningluo concealed his strength from the strength of the 1-star fighter. If he said the strength of the great fighter, everyone would be shocked. In fact, it is not only her. As long as I have seen other people in the tent who Ningluo shot before, I secretly guess in my heart, what level of potential can this seemingly abnormal guy be considered? Okay, let's start, from the left, give your name. Level, age. With a slight smile, Ruoline held the ink pen in her hand. Laughed softly. Seeing that the registration was about to begin, Xiao Yu and others in the tent also sat down with great interest. Xiao Yu smiled lightly, then stopped talking, and cast his gaze into the center of the tent where the evaluation had already begun. Black Rock, 9th Duan of Duji, age 20. A dark-skinned youth at the top of the row on the left measured his own data. Smiled and nodded. Instructor Ruoline quickly wrote down the student's information, and her red lips opened slightly. Level E. Linton, the 8th stage of Fighting Spirit, age 19. F grade. Wei Li, 9th Dan of Fighting Spirit, age 17. E level. At the same time as it was reported, a few freshmen who had just passed the forecast from the outer square would occasionally come in outside. After being severely warned by some seniors, these freshmen hurriedly stood behind the team and waited to report their own data. Among the nearly 20 people who reported in the past, most of them were under the fighters. Of course, some of them were originally Juden Dochi, but because of the defeat of the attacking fighters, they were finally reduced to the 8 Duan Duji. The rebirth of Qi. When I came to Ningluo, the best result among all the people in front was just a 1-star fighter at the age of 17. According to his potential value, he should only be considered a grade D. However, even so, it would be worth it. Ruoline was slightly pleased. After all, she became a 1-star fighter at the age of 17. This kind of potential is already pretty good. At this time, Nolan Yanran walked up. Nolan Yanran, 7-star fighter, age, 15 years old. As soon as he said this, countless pairs of eyes looked towards Nolan Yanran and couldn't believe it. Ning Luo handed over the exercises he signed into his little junior sister. She doesn't want her junior sister's cultivation base to be seen. Even teacher Ruoline was extremely surprised. He didn't expect this little Nizi to reach the 7-star fighter, and he was only 15 years old. 7-star fighter, which means it is S level. Ruoline thought that only Ning Luo and Xiao Zuner could be a grade, but she didn't expect Nolan Yanran to be S grade directly. Next, Xiao Zuner pursed her small mouth. Zuner nodded her head, smiled. Lian moved slightly, stepped forward, and the girl's soft voice echoed gently in the tent. Xiao Zuner, age 15, 8-star fighter. Even though Zuner said that, Ning Luo knew that Zuner also had a star master now, and she didn't know how much strength she had hidden. Above, she just raised a pen to record Ruoline, her wrist stiffened, and her gentle and pretty face finally appeared shocked. 8-star fighter, 15 years old, how is this possible? At the age of 15, he reached the 8-star fight. You know, when he was 15, he had only 9 stages of fighting spirit. This is a genius, even if it is compared to the enchantress in school, it is not an exaggeration. S level, 2 S levels. At this moment, no matter who it was, there was a look of shock. They did not expect that a small Yutan city would have 2 S level monsters. After Zuner reported the data, it was Ning Luo's turn. Ning Luo stepped forward step by step. Ning Luo, 15 years old, a 9-star fighter. Ah, Ning Luo just blurted out, and there was a sudden silence in the tent where he was whispering. At the corner, Rob's face was extremely surprised. He didn't expect that this boy who looked only 16 or 17 years old would be able to reach the 9-star fighter. Beside Rob, Jay Law's face was slightly pale, and then his face was bitter. No wonder he was defeated so miserably. It turns out that this guy has been pretending to be a pig and eat a tiger. Class S. She blinked her slender eyelashes in amazement. After a while, Instructor Ruoline smiled with a soft smile, which made her heart moving. 3 S grades, I said that I picked up the treasure this time. It seems, it's not fake. Like a girl, teacher Ruoline blinked playfully. Such amorous feelings caused some men in the tent to suddenly straighten your eyes. Ruoline instructor is also very happy. 3 S grades, their Canaan Academy really picked up the baby. Ruoline didn't expect to come to a small Yutan city, and she recruited 3 S level students. She will definitely be promoted when she goes back this time. Ting Jie and Rob were also extremely surprised. They had never expected Ning Luo to be so powerful. Ning Luo has such a talent, entering the academy must be the key training object of the academy, so even if you want revenge, you have to weigh it. Rob gave a wink. At this time, Rob and CJ stepped forward and came to Ning Luo. Ning Luo, it was our fault before, I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive us. Rob and CJ apologized. Ning Luo looked at them and smiled slightly. If an apology is useful, there won't be so many hatreds in the world. Ning Luo said, his eyes suddenly turned red. He opened the pupil of control that he had just obtained. Ning Luo suddenly opened the pupil of control. The pupil of control can absolutely control people whose realm is lower than himself. Of course, he can only turn on the pupil of control in a moment, and no one can see it. At this time, both Spike's and Rob's eyes lit up. In an instant, they were controlled by Ning Luo. Can this controlling pupil really control others? Ning Luo wanted to experiment. At this time, he was thinking of making Rob kneel down in his heart. Pooh! Suddenly, Rob knelt in front of Ning Luo. At this moment, the whole audience was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Senior Rob to kneel down to apologize to Ning Luo. After, Ning Luo let CJ directly kneel down again. Suddenly, both of them knelt in front of Ning Luo. This control pupil is too powerful, it can make people obey absolutely, if this function is used in some aspects. He. Doesn't you get whoever you want? What am I thinking? How could Ning Luo be such a wretched person? I have to rely on my own charm to conquer others. Ning Luo thought in his heart. But for the two people in front of me, even if they apologized to themselves, I would not forgive them. Just as Ning Luo said, if an apology is useful, there won't be so many grievances in this world. Although Ning Luo is a generous person, it depends on which aspect and for whom. For them, Ning Luo didn't want to show mercy at all. You all kill each other. Ning Luo gave the order directly in his heart. At this time, their eyes suddenly lit up. Then walked towards each other. At this moment, everyone felt something was wrong, their behavior was really weird. Rob, stab Jay, what are you doing? At this time, Instructor Ruolin asked quickly. But Rob and CJ didn't seem to hear the voice of Teacher Ruolin, and ignored her. They slowly took out their weapons and walked in front of each other. What are you going to do? Stop. Instructor Ruolin continued. But, they still ignore it. They walked towards each other. At this time, they raised their weapons and then stabbed at each other. At this moment, everyone was shocked. But they were too late to stop, and they saw each other piercing their weapons into each other's chest. The blood spurted out suddenly. At this moment, no matter who it is, I am extremely surprised. Everyone can't believe their eyes. How is this possible? How could Rob and Thorn kill each other? How could this be possible? Instructor Ruolin opened her small mouth and couldn't believe all this. How could the disciples she brought kill each other? She had never encountered this kind of thing before. Nolan Yanran, Xiao Ning, Xiao Yu all looked at all this with surprised expressions. Ruolin instructor responded quickly. She immediately dismissed everyone, and then their Canaan Institute had to deal with this matter. But they didn't even know that Ning Luo did it. Ning Luo didn't do anything at all, but just used mind control. How could they find it out? In the end, the death of these two academies could not be stopped, because they could not find out the clues. Although some people had suspected Ning Luo, everyone watched at the scene and Ning Luo didn't do anything, so Ning Luo's suspicion was also dispelled. In the end, the matter was solved in this way, and Ning Luo and the others were also notified to enroll. Ning Luo reported his name, and he was about to go to the Tagor desert to find the heart of Qinglian. Ning Luo's Yuhuohue can absorb many kinds of different fires, so Ning Luo wants to get it whether it is the Qinglian earth heart fire or falling heart fire. Ning Luo found concubine Ya before leaving. Princess Ya saw Ning Luo, and she was overjoyed. I saw that the two of them had nothing to say, and hugged each other directly. Yafei looked at Ning Luo, and rode directly on Ning Luo, spurring Ning Luo. Ning Luo didn't know how she felt about Yafei, but she just felt that she was very beautiful, and she was a bewitching fairy. Little fairy, why are you in such a hurry? Aren't you in a hurry? Yafei said while hugging Ning Luo. The two lay on the bed, gently comforting each other. After one day, Ning Luo was about to leave. Ning Luo helped Yafei walk down the road. Ning Luo tried too hard yesterday, so now, Yafei is limping a bit. The two walked side by side, the willows were breeze, and the green silk was flying. You are going to leave soon. Yafei's slightly sad voice passed into Ning Luo's ears. Ning Luo nodded helplessly, and walked forward slowly, standing side by side with the concubine Ya, turning his head, but seeing the somewhat sad little face and the proud chest, some enchanted. Will you come back? There was an inexplicable coldness in Shui Ling's eyes. Yafei bit her red lips and whispered. Ning Luo shrugged and smiled faintly. I will be back. Of course, Ning Luo will come back. He promised Xiao Yan and agreed to his 3-year appointment. Although he didn't think Xiao Yan could beat himself, he would still come back. Yafei Lu frowned, sighed lightly, and muttered in a voice that only he could hear. Then I wait for you to come back. Ning Luo didn't know what to say when looking at the concubine Ya, whose little face suddenly became bitter. Ning Luo knew that even though she was a teenager, Yafei seemed to have fallen in love with herself, and Ning Luo still didn't know what to do with this love. Ning Luo didn't hear what Yafei said. He smiled and said, I will come back later, and then I will come back to marry you. After talking for a long time, the two of them still have to part with each other. Ning Luo turned around to leave. At this moment, Yafei suddenly ran over and hugged Ning Luo from behind. At this time, Ning Luo was extremely surprised. I really like you. If you don't dislike me, you must come back and find me. Yafei whispered while holding Ning Luo's back. The breeze blew across the garden, the green willows were fluttering, and the woman was holding the young man tightly. The bodies of the two fit together perfectly, as if they did not separate each other. Ning Luo was frightened, a little stupid by this sudden action. After a while, Yafei's pink ear-tips rose brightly, struggling slightly, and then she stopped shyly, with a slightly seductive look on her small face. Faint red. She buried the soft blue silk on Ning Luo's back, and held Ning Luo quietly. Ning Luo didn't know what to say and what to promise. But he can feel it, and it feels so warm now. This kind of warm feeling is in my heart. I should like Yafei. Since this is the case, Ning Luo must take responsibility. In the original book, Xiao Yan only teases and does not marry, and in the end he doesn't even know the ending of the concubine Ya. But Ning Luo is more frank. Since I like it in my heart, then I must be responsible to her. Okay. Ning Luo just responded with one word. Okay, just one word. However, it made Yafei extremely relieved. At this time, tears flowed from the corner of Yafei's eyes, and Yafei hugged Ning Luo and cried, I will wait for you. The two embraced in the wind, the wicker was flying with the wind, the catkins were all over the sky. Ning Luo and the others came to Canaan City. Canaan City is a very big city. When they arrived here, both Nalan Yanran and Xiao Ning were extremely surprised, because they had never been to such a big city. Ning Luo was also very surprised when he arrived here. Ning Luo has never been to such a big city, but he is relatively calm. Nalan Yanran adhered to Ning Luo all the way. Brother, do you really want to leave? Nalan Yanran asked. Ning Luo nodded and said, you go back to Yunlanzong first, I will be back soon. Xiao Yu had looked for opportunities to get close to Ning Luo many times along the way. Wait until the two get along. At this time, Xiao Yu looked at Ning Luo and said, Ning Luo, are you not going to be responsible for me? Responsible? What responsibility? Ning Luo asked. You have watched me all. Why, are you ready to leave? Xiao Yu knew that Ning Luo was going to leave, and said immediately. I will definitely enter Canaan College, and I will come back. Ning Luo smiled. HMPH, if you can run, the monk can't run to the temple, I will be waiting for you at Canaan College. They all entered Canaan Academy. Ning Luo and Zuner Nalan Yanran did not have any accidents, and they all became Ning Luo's key training targets. Ning Luo is not interested in the courses taught in Canaan College. His goal is Falling Heart Flame, but now, with him, he can't get Falling Heart Flame at all, so he still has to wait for the opportunity. If he remembers correctly, it should be 2 or 3 years before Falling Heart Flame will riot. At that time, it was the best time to capture Falling Heart Flame. Moreover, if Xiao Yan is not accidental now, he should have gone to the Tagor desert to look for Qinglian Heartfire, so Ning Luo must also hurry up, he can't let Xiao Yan find Qinglian Heartfire in front of him. So Ning Luo also wanted to go to the Tagor desert. Ning Luo directly asked for leave, and then went to the Tagor desert. Ningluo is now the focus of training, so it is very convenient to ask for leave. When he reached the city a few hundred meters away, Ningluo's flight speed gradually slowed down, his body trembled slightly, and the purple cloud wings behind him emitted bursts of lavender light, slowly shrinking. It turned into a tattoo and was attached to Ningluo's back. With his body flipped in the air, Ningluo stood firmly on the ground with his feet firmly on the ground, patted some dust on his clothes and looked up at the huge yellow city that appeared at the end of the line of sight. At the same time, he smiled slightly. It was also relieved. Ningluo came to the Tagor desert. Ningluo remembered that this was the territory of snake people. Snake people, that is to say, Queen Medusa is here. According to this system, most of the Queen Medusa is also one of her goddess. Ningluo possesses the heavenly drive royal beast Ju, and the snake man should be regarded as half man and half beast. Ningluo should be able to control them. Slightly startled, Ningluo stretched out his hand and grabbed a few in the space in front of him. He pursed his mouth. After a while, he said softly, "No wonder, almost 80% of the air here belongs to earth attribute and fire attribute energy." Due to the terrain, the Tagor desert is most suitable for people who practice fire attribute techniques and earth attribute techniques, so Ningluo's practice here has greatly improved his fire attribute. Gradually approach the city. There are more and more passers-by in the surrounding area, and most of these passers-by, men are bare-armed, and their skin is dark and lean. At a glance, it seemed to be quite bold, and a woman passing by occasionally. Although the skin is also dark, but it is a bit ***** bronze. The women here are not as subtle and shy as the women in the Empire. A tight leather suit just covers the chest and a little underneath, while those slender waists are boldly exposed. The slender and tight thighs are also just wrapped in short skirts or shorts. During walking, the water snake-like waist is twisted, which has a charming charm and style. Along the way, Ningluo can be regarded as feasting his eyes, and smacked his lips. Looking up at the yellow city that can already see the specific scale, he sighed, "It's a yellow city as expected. If it weren't for my concentration, I might have had a nosebleed." Ningluo came to the city gate, and saw that above the city gate, two huge red fonts were carved on the city wall. From a distance, it turned out to have a faint ***** feeling. "Mochung," said softly. Ningluo smiled and slowly walked towards the gate of the city. At the gate of the city, more than a dozen soldiers in armor were holding spears and shouting at passers-by to pay the entrance tax. Looking at these soldiers in spite of the heat. Perhaps because of the hot weather, these soldiers guarding here were also a little irritated by the irritable weather, and they shouted unceremoniously, constantly urging passers-by at the city gate. Walked towards the city gate, listening to the yelling from the soldiers. Ningluo frowned slightly, shook his head, and walked straight into the city. "Hey, kid, I didn't see that there is payment." Looking at Ruo no one there, and directly facing Ningluo who walked into the city, a soldier's eyes suddenly stared. Ningluo didn't want to cause trouble, so he directly controlled him with the controlling eye. Immediately, the curse that came to the mouth, he swallowed alive, his anger turned into a flattering smile. "My lord, please." Ningluo's footsteps didn't stop. Ningluo slowly walked to the soldier, glanced at him faintly, and then crossed his shoulders with the latter, who was trembling in his heels, and walked towards the city. Slowly walked out of the dim city wall passage. His sight was slightly bright, and the city buildings with unique desert characteristics appeared in the field of vision. The buildings with strange appearances made Ningluo a little eye-opener. To come to this strange place, Ningluo must have a map. After he walked for a while, the map shop named Gutu. It appeared in Ningluo's sight. Sweeping his eyes outside the shop, Ningluo was a little surprised. This shop is not as luxurious and public as other houses. It seems that it still has a faintly simple atmosphere. With a bit of surprise in his heart, Ningluo slowly walked into the shop. The interior of the shop was not too spacious. The faint light of the two moonstones illuminated the shop quite brightly. His eyes swept across the interior of the shop. There are not many people who buy maps, and they look cold, making Ningluo wonder if he is in the wrong place. Slowly walked into the shop. Ningluo glanced around, and finally stopped behind the counter with an old man who was carefully making a map with his head down. This old man was obviously quite old, but even though he was completely white, hair, but the dry palm holding the black drawing pen is still strong and strong. Did not disturb the old man aloud. Ning Luo glanced across the large number of maps on the counter, and looked at it with interest. The clear route on the map made him nod with satisfaction. After watching the map for a while, Ning Luo looked at the old man who was not over yet, pursed his lips, and walked slowly again to the quaint wooden frame in the corner of the shop. This wooden frame is obviously old and full of rotten wood holes. On top of it, some yellowed maps are randomly stacked. Looking at the broken marks on the surface of these maps, it seems to be a failure when making maps. Randomly flipping through these yellowed maps with his palms, a faint musty smell came over his face. Frowning slightly, Ning Luo picked up a stack of failed works, his palms shook slightly, and a sheet was only the size of a palm. The broken pictures suddenly fell from the stack of failed works. Ning Luo didn't pay too much attention to the broken and fallen picture. After looking through the failed work in his hand, Ning Luo put it back boredly. When he put it back, his gaze cast a lazy look. For the small broken picture, his eyes blinked slightly, then, the moving palm suddenly solidified. With a slight trembling palm, Ning Luo carefully picked up the broken picture. Suddenly, Ning Luo could feel the violent beating of his heart at this time. He swallowed hard and put the broken primitive picture in his hand, looking at him. With a few touches of ecstasy, he carefully scanned the slightly familiar mysterious root above the picture. After a while, Ning Luo slowly narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tremblingly muttered, "It really is." The palm of his hand was a little trembling while holding this broken picture that looked like it would turn into powder at the touch of a touch. Ning Luo's eyes were filled with unconcealed ecstasy. He didn't expect that in this extremely accidental situation, he would actually get it. A mysterious broken picture. Looking at the mysterious roots on this yellowed picture, although Ning Luo still does not understand the mystery, the outline of these roots made him faintly familiar. Because of this mysterious picture, he used to be in the Warcraft Mountains. I saw it in the cave where Xiao Yishan was looking for treasure. That representative was able to find the mysterious map of Jinglian Demon Fire, ranked 3rd in the legendary different fire list. Ning Luo smiled, with a little excitement on his face, carefully holding the mysterious and broken picture, forcibly suppressing the impulse to take out another map in Naji for comparison, and took a deep breath. I want to calm down the turbulence in my heart caused by this extremely unexpected gain. If this is the map of Jinglian Demon Fire, is this old gentleman the Ice Emperor Hebadong? Ice Emperor, one of the top 10 powerhouses of the previous generation of Gamma Empire, was solitary and proud of human nature, and was extremely good at ice vindictiveness. In his anger, an entire city was frozen in ice. Among the top 10 powerhouses of the year, he was one of the few fighting emperor powerhouses. Later, he fought against Yunlin Mountain as the supreme master of the Yunlanzong. Although he was defeated in the end, the opponent still couldn't win easily. The previous Gamma Empire and Azumo Empire held the strong conference. Fighting against each other alone, a fighting king and a fighting king, but not defeated, Yi shocked the audience. After that powerhouse meeting, the Ice Emperor gradually disappeared from the sight of countless people. Until now, the name of the Ice Emperor has become a powerful person in the memory of the older generations of the Gamma Empire. The top 10 powerhouses of the younger generation have already outlawed the glory and scenery that belonged to them before. After the strong meeting between the empires, he came to the Tagor Desert. Occasionally, I got the fragmented picture, but because of this it attracted the pursuit of the king of snakes in the desert, Queen Medusa, and was defeated in the hands of Queen Medusa and caught Medusas. The sealing curse of the snake, not only the body is rapidly aging, but even the strength is sealed at the level of the fighting spirit. In other words, this is the Emperor Do who helped Xiao Yan go to the Yunlin sect. At this time, the white-haired old man in the shop finally finished his work, but he still did not look up, and the old voice echoed flatly in the room. "Are you going to buy a map of the Tagor Desert, right?" Hearing the old man's questioning, Ning Luo turned around and walked slowly to the counter. Nodded with a smile, and said politely, "Old sir, can you give me the most accurate and detailed map of the desert? Things are on the counter, choose by yourself." The old man didn't mean to stand up and introduce him. Instead, he just said faintly, "It looks like a businessman." Looking at the old man's peculiar attitude, Ning Luo was a little stunned, but now he is asking for it. He had no choice but to nod it helplessly, and randomly selected a map from the counter that looked quite detailed, and then cautiously spread out the quaint map fragment on his palm, and asked softly, "Old sir, I don't know. Do you still have this kind of map fragments here?" Listening to Ning Luo's question, the old man who had been devoting himself to drawing the map, his palm trembled invisibly, the carefully drawn route. It was a slight deviation. Frowning slightly, the old man finally slowly raised his head. His eyes swept across the broken map in Ning Luo's hands, but an inexplicable meaning passed by the muddy old eyes. Looked at the old face that was raised up. Ning Luo couldn't help but stun slightly. There was a scary scar on this face from the left cheek to the corner of his eye. Although the old man's eyes were quite peaceful, the scar still made him vaguely fierce. Have seen fragments of this kind of map before?" His eyes swept across the robe representing the identity of a pharmacist on Ning Luo's body, and the old man's voice was slightly surprised. Hearing that, Ning Luo narrowed his eyes, smiled and shook his head, and said, "I once seemed to have seen this kind of map fragments in an auction house. At that time, I competed randomly. But in the end, because the other party's bid was too high, so I gave up. I suddenly saw this fragment of the map in the old gentleman's place today, and it seemed a bit similar to what I had encountered before, so I wanted to ask. Jinglian demon fire is not a common thing. This type of demon flame, rank 3rd on the list of different fires, can make any uncontested hermit become greedy, so Ning Luo will not be stupid. Explain directly that you are pregnant with a broken picture." Oh, looking across Ning Luo's face, the old man seemed to believe his words, and said indifferently, "No, this is just what I got by accident. According to my years of drawing experience, this seems to be just an incomplete fragment of a map." Quote, "The old gentleman can tell me where did you get it?" Ning Luo frowned slightly and continued to ask. "It was dug in the desert." The old man's tone was plain, without any waves. In response to the old man's extremely irresponsible answer, Ning Luo gave a wry smile, holding the incomplete picture in his hand, and said, "Old sir, can you sell this map to me? I am willing to pay a high price." "Not for sale." The old man slowly lowered his head and once again placed his mind on the unfinished map. Although his tone was plain, he had an unquestionable attitude. Ning Luo was not angry, and smiled lightly. "Old gentleman, if I guessed correctly, you should have been marked by snake venom." As soon as he said this, Hebadong's dry eyes showed a gleam of light, and he looked at Ning Luo in astonishment. Hebadong was immediately surprised. "I was chased by Queen Medusa, and got the mark of snake venom. Only myself should know this thing. Who is this kid who knows that he has got the mark of snake venom? Could it be that this kid is a powerful alchemist, so he can see that he has been poisoned? But how can such a small child be a powerful alchemist?" Hebadong felt that Ning Luo was not simple. First, he could see the mystery of the broken picture. Second, he could also see that he had been imprinted with snake venom. This shows that this child must not be an ordinary person. And, the fact that such a small child can walk alone in the desert alone proves that Ning Luo is extraordinary. "Oh, snake venom mark, where do you start?" Hebadong wanted to test Ning Luo, so he asked directly. Ning Luo can't actually tell what snake venom mark he has. This is not the original book. Do you remember that he has the snake venom mark? Ning Luo wants the fragment of Jinglian demon fire, how can he not flicker? He also has some talents for his own magic stick attribute. Ning Luo pretended to be advanced and looked at Hebadong and said, "You have good mental power, but you are only in the realm of doling. This is very unreasonable. Therefore, you should have been a Duhuang once, but the realm has fallen to the realm of doling." Ning Luo said. Hebadong was extremely surprised, all of which can be seen. Is this kid really an expert? But how could there be an expert at such a young age? Go on. Hebadong asked pretendingly calmly. "Your flesh and blood are dry, qi weakened, yin tang is black, and there is a black qi on the palm of your right hand, haha. This is not a snake venom mark, and what is it?" Ning Luo laughed. At this time, Hebadong slowly opened his palms, and his heart was suddenly shocked. Sure enough, there was a black air in the palm of his right hand. Who is this kid, who even knows this? Hebadong couldn't calm down anymore, and looked at Ning Luo in shock. Perhaps, the child in front of him was really an expert. However, Hebadong was once a fighting emperor after all, and he would not trust others so easily. As for the tall or not, you will know at a try. Therefore, Hai Bodong wants to try Ning Luo's strength. Haibodong's face flashed with evil spirits, and the hideous scars appeared to be a lot more fierce, and the soles of his feet stepped on the ground, and his figure shot at Ning Luo like lightning. As Haibo flashed past, inside the shop, the icy air quickly permeated, and the faint mist also hovered in it, completely obscuring Ning Luo's sight. Ning Luo smiled faintly, but did not panic. Because he knew that the ice Haibodong was indeed a fighting emperor. He, who was not marked by the snake venom, is now just a fighting spirit. Doling is just one level ahead of him. Ning Luo is invincible at the same level. As for the first level, Ning Luo is very confident. Hanbing immediately restrained Ning Luo's speed. Ning Luo felt slightly awe-inspiring, and with a move, among the purple cyclone in the lower abdomen inside his body, wisps of purple fire-fighting air suddenly differentiated, and the purple fire-fighting air flowed quickly along the meridians. After an instant, Ning Luo's body shook slightly, and the faint purple fighting chi gauze completely wrapped his body in it. On the surface of the fighting chi gauze, wisps of purple fire rose up, and the invading ice the cold mist burned into nothingness. Dookie gauze was possessed. Ning Luo clearly felt that his own state had improved a lot, and looked at Hai Bodong with plain eyes. Good fellow, you didn't panic in the face of my attack. It seems that you are indeed not an ordinary person. Haibodong smiled. Senior, do you want to test my abilities? Ning Luo smiled slightly. Since you want this broken picture, then I must not see if you have the ability to get this broken picture. Haibodong's meaning is very clear. As long as he defeats him, he will give the broken picture to himself. Moreover, Ning Luo knew that since he knew the imprint of snake venom, he was also an alchemist, and possessed no weaker than the flames of a different fire. Haibodong would naturally ask himself to help him remove the imprint of snake venom. Luo calculated it and waited for Hai Bodong to jump into the pit. The breath of Hai Bodong Doling was released, watching the purple fighting chi gauze with purple flames possessing Ning Luo. In the surrounding white fog, there was a low horror. Obviously, that person mysterious Si Bodong had never expected that Ning Luo could summon a fighting gauze with flames attached. S face changed slightly. Ning Luo flicked his fingers, and a purple flame suddenly emerged from his palm, melting away the surrounding frost and cold air. Purple flame, your flame, is it a strange fire? Looking at Ning Luo's behavior, Hai Bodong hidden in the mist, said in surprise again. Even though the thing made me lose my strength as before. But it is not difficult to clean up your hairy boy. Perceiving Ning Luo's secret actions, in the white fog, Hai Bodong sneered. A white shadow suddenly rushed out, almost like a flash of lightning, approaching Ning Luo. Oh, really, you are too confident. Ning Luo smiled, and the flame in his hand was immediately released. Looked at the flames coming with the sound of oppressive wind. Haibodong's dry hands quickly formed a knot. Lightly shouted, Ningbing mirror. With the end of the old man's handprint, the white mist in front of him suddenly flipped. After an instant, a transparent ice mirror about half a meter long and wide condensed abruptly in front of him. Boom! The flame hit the ice mirror. Suddenly, the two forces offset in the air and exploded. Looking at Ning Luo, who was slightly pale and shot upside down, Haibodong sneered again, waved his palm, dozens of spiral ice thorns, forming rapidly in front of him, and then between Haibodong's wave of hands, overwhelmingly shot Ning Luo violently away. The soles of the feet rubbed a distance on the ground. Ning Luo looked up at the massive ice thorn attack that was mixed with the icy breath, frowning slightly, and the soles of his feet suddenly stamped on the ground. With a burst of energy, his body rushed up. At this time, Ning Luo circulated a purple flame, and the purple flame in his hand condensed into a spherical shape. Smiled faintly at the corner of his mouth, and released a fireball at Haibodong. Art Fire Escape Fireball. This is Ning Luo's own fighting skill. The name is of course Ning Luo borrowed for fun. It just compresses his flame vindictiveness into a fireball. Is the same principle as Xiaoyan's Buddha's Fury Lotus. Xiaoyan compressed the flame into a lotus, and Ning Luo compressed it into a fireball. As for the power, it should be similar to Xiaoyan's Buddha's Anger Lotus. It's just that Ning Luo didn't want to move like Xiaoyan, so he compressed it into a shape and renamed it. Suddenly, the fireball was released and collided with Haibodong's ice thorn. The fireball burst out suddenly, as if torn the air, with a faint purple flame emerging on its surface. Looking at the fireball coming from the violent shot, Hai Bodong raised his brows in amazement. The boy in front of him gave him too much surprise. However, astonished, Hai Bodong didn't feel the slightest softness in his hands. As soon as he opened and closed his palms, countless tiny ice strands were condensed. As soon as the palms were thrown, the ice strands rose to the sky, and then they focused on the sky and the earth. The ruler entangled away, and in just a moment, the ruler was wrapped in a thick layer of white ice silk. Under the entanglement of the overwhelming ice silk, the fierce energy carried by the fireball was rapidly dissolving, and when it was only half a meter from the top of Haibodong's head, it finally stopped completely. Ning Luo was not surprised. The purple flames on the palm of his hand blew away. With a flick of his finger, a burst of purple fire burst out, and finally all the ice threads were burned to pieces. Boy, you are very strong. You have such a strong strength at a young age. Hai Bodong said while looking at Ning Luo. The old man passed the prize. Ning Luo smiled. At this time, Ning Luo was also a little serious. The vindictiveness on his body continuously soared, directly soaring to the realm of the 6-star Grand Fighter. Ning Luo doesn't need to be so serious when dealing with ordinary fighting spirits, but the fighting spirit in front of him was once a fighting emperor and should not be underestimated. At a young age, he turned out to be a big fighter. Hai Bodong looked at Ning Luo in surprise. Ning Luo didn't speak, but a powerful purple flame condensed in his hand. He didn't want to use the power of his minds. This was his whole card, and he wouldn't use it until the critical moment. Seeing the vindictive energy erupting from Ning Luo, Haibodong faintly felt a little danger. After he condensed the vindictive energy into an ice gun, Haibodong still felt a little unsafe. One hand quickly formed a seal, and then lightly shouted, "Ice Spirit Armor." Fell with the shout, and the surrounding ice mist suddenly formed a thick ice armor shining with cold luster on Haibodong's body. The weapon in Haibodong's hand and the ice armor on his body were completely condensed by fighting chi, and this requires at least a strong fighting spirit to manage it. Above the vindictive continent, ordinary people, when they arrive at the great fighting master, then the fighting energy can be released. At this time, if the fighting energy is covered on the weapon, the attack power can be greatly increased. And when it reaches the Douling, it will be able to condense like the current white-haired Hai Bodong, weapons and armors completely transformed by fighting chi. This kind of weapon and defense are naturally far from being a metaphor for ordinary weapons and armor. Let the Hai Bodong deal with it so solemnly and with all his strength, it can be seen that at this time, in his heart, how much attention he paid to Ning Luo, who had suddenly increased his strength. Ignoring the appearance of Hai Bodong, who was heavily armed, Ning Luo in the air, the aura emanating from his body became more and more intense. The turbulent vindictive energy contained in his body turned out to be diffused by nearly half of the fog below. Watching Ning Luo's momentum will break the dense fog, Hai Bodong's face changed again, and he did not dare to neglect any more. With a wave of the ice gun in his hand, countless sharp ice thorns quickly condensed in the sky above his head, and then brought gusts of breaking wind. The sound flew away at Ning Luo in the air. Above the mid-air, the howling gradually ceased, and Ning Luo's wings vigorously vibrated, and his body dived down like a big pong. Faintly looking at the ice thorns that overwhelmed the sky. Face 10 with your hands, and then gently close it. As the palms collide with each other, an invisible energy spread out from it like lightning, and then, immediately after the overwhelming ice thorn, there was a click. It was extremely magnificent and turned into cold white powder in midair. How is it possible? Looking at the high-speed rotating ice thorn that was shaken into powder without the slightest warning, Hai Bodong was slightly taken aback, and immediately lost his voice. Ignoring Haibodong's surprise, Ning Luo's wings flicked and flashed straight above Haibodong, condensing a long sword in his hand. Although the heavenly sword is a thunder attribute sacred sword, it can still be activated with the fire attribute, but its power is not as good as the thunder attribute. Seeing Ning Luo's long sword, Hai Bodong's face suddenly became extremely dignified. He knew in his heart that, despite the silent attack, the destructive power contained in it was not at all what Ning Luo had before. Attack can be compared to. Took a step back cautiously, and Hai Bodong's palm suddenly tightened, and immediately the ice gun carried the ice-cold energy and stabled out violently. Looking at Hai Bodong, who had chosen to hit hard, Ning Luo's eyes clearly passed a faint taunt, and the long sword suddenly accelerated and finally bombarded with the ice gun. The long sword and the ice spear blasted together, and suddenly a fierce energy ripple spread out from the junction, shaking the ground in the room into a series of cracks like spider webs. As soon as broken was handed over, the ice gun was compressed into a bow-like shape, and with Ning Luo's cold drink and a click, the ice gun broke apart and ice chips splashed everywhere. One round, the weapon was easily broken by the opponent, and Hai Bodong's expression suddenly became quite ugly. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him, even though he was just a master, was so powerful. Hai Bodong kicked his toes, and his figure quickly retreated. When he retreated, his hands danced quickly. With the dance of his palms, 7 ice mirrors flashing with cold light quickly condensed out, and Ning Luo wanted to chase him. The way to go is completely blocked. Having just arranged 7 ice mirrors, Hai Bodongsheng still had no time to breathe. He only heard a clear sound. As he lifted his eyes, he was a little surprised to find that Ning Luo, who was holding a long sword, had actually rushed all the way, along the way. Before his ice mirror touched his body, it was burned into nothingness by the purple flame outside his body. Good boy, I still don't believe it today. I have lived in seclusion for more than 20 years, and I will be rendered helpless by you, a little boy. Ning Luo's quick attack immediately followed. There was anger in his heart gradually. Hai Bodong frowned, and his feet suddenly stamped on the ground. The icy vindictiveness was actually frozen into thick icing on the ground more than 10 meters around. Xuanbing spin kill. His hands quickly formed a knot in front of him, and Hai Bodong let out a low growl in his throat. Suddenly, ice blades in the shape of a crescent moon appeared around him. There were more and more ice blades, and in the end, it turned out that Hai Bodong's body was completely hidden in it. The ice blades were connected to each other, forming a small spiral storm that was completely combined by the ice blades. Go! In the middle of the storm, a low shout came out, and the ice blade storm suddenly swept away at Ning Luo. Along the way, the floor of the room was almost destroyed in ravines. Some crystal counters were covered by ice blade all the way. Scratched, bursting suddenly, but the place where it burst was as smooth as a mirror. At this time, Ning Luo stopped. He quietly held the divine sword and looked at the ice blade shot by Hai Bodong. The fire attribute energy in his body was instantly mobilized, and the purple flames continued to adhere to it. Excalibur body. The same principle as the compressed flame, Ning Luo condensed his purple fire onto the Excalibur and dispatched it by the Excalibur. The Excalibur is the Excalibur. Even if it is the fire attribute energy, it can be increased more than 10 times. God Flame Cut. This is also one of Ning Luo's own fighting skills. Suddenly, blazing flames erupted from Ning Luo's divine sword. Suddenly, the fierce flames slashed out, as if to burn everything. All the ice sculptures around melted, and the ice thorns condensed in the air were also burned. The powerful air wave rushed out and hit Hai Bodong's body severely. Boom! With a loud noise, Hai Bodong flew out and hit the bookshelf. He didn't expect that he was a dignified Duhuang strong man. Although he was only in Doling realm now, he was defeated by a teenage boy. How can this be? Who is this kid? Ning Luo took a faint breath, and suddenly, the flame was retracted into his body. Ning Luo smiled slightly and said, "Old sir, I won, this broken picture should belong to me." Boy, I really underestimated you. Just as Ning Luo turned around, Hai Bodong's slightly tired voice came out. Ning Luo smiled and said, "Old sir, I said that I had no intention of having asterisk with you, but this thing is really important to me, so. Haha, I didn't expect to live in seclusion here for more than 20 years, but today you will be so embarrassed by your junior. It's really sad." Hai Bodong's voice was slightly desolate, but after a moment, his voice suddenly changed. Turning around, looking through the mysterious ice layer, staring at Ning Luo outside, faintly said, "Boy, this broken picture is important to you." Ning Luo was silent for a while and nodded slightly. Hey. Upon seeing this, Hai Bodong smiled, his smile a little weird. After trying my best in the desert to get this broken map, I used my years of drawing experience to perfectly divide it into 2 parts, one of which was taken by you earlier. And the other, hee. Hai Bodong sneered. Oh, do you mean you still have a copy? Ning Luo was not angry, looking at Hai Bodong with interest and asked. Yes, I still have one. Hai Bodong replied. Ning Luo looked at him lightly and said, since you said it, that is to say, you want to make a deal with me. The little guy's mind is really extraordinary. With your mind and talent, although I dare not say anything now. But I can be sure. 10 years later, you may be able to stand at the top of the Jama Empire. Seeing Ning Luo's flat appearance, Hai Bodong couldn't help but sigh. Ning Luo looked at Hai Bodong's high evaluation without comment, and frowned. You don't need to say this, let's talk about it. How do you want to make a deal? If I guessed correctly, the flame you used earlier should be a kind of magical fire. His face was blue and shivered, Hai Bodong said in a little fright. Ning Luo raised his eyes, noncommittal. His flame intensity is not as high as Qinglian geocentric fire ranks 19th, but the 23rd ranked abnormal fire like Xuanwangwo should have the intensity, so his flame can also be regarded as a kind of abnormal fire. Besides, Ning Luo hasn't used his bone spirit to cold fire. If you use bone spirit cold fire, I'm afraid Hai Dongpo is not his opponent yet. If he is absorbing the Qinglian earth heart fire, I'm afraid his flame rank can be even higher. Boy, have you heard the name of Ice Emperor Hai Bodong? Hai Bodong looked at Ning Luo and asked. Ning Luo directly said, I haven't heard of it. Hai Bodong was hit hard. Of course, Ning Luo knew the Ice Hai Bodong, but a fighting emperor, Ning Luo didn't care that much. It doesn't matter if I haven't heard it. Anyway, you have seen it before that I was hit by Queen Medusa's snake venom mark. Now that you know, I think you can help me lift the seal. Hai Bodong said. However, if he didn't help him, if Xiao Yan would help him according to the plot of the original book, then he would have one more enemy of the Emperor Do. If you don't kill him directly, you don't seem to be a murderer. So, measure it, help him, it seems that there is nothing to lose. Chapter 71. In the past few decades, I have obtained a prescription that can break the seal. As long as I refine the pill mentioned above, then I can recover my strength. Hai Bodong continued in a deep voice. The first prerequisite for refining this kind of pill is that the alchemist must have a different fire. As long as you can refine the pill that I need, then I will not only give you that little broken picture, but at the same time, my Ice Emperor Hai Bodong also owes you a favor. You should know. What is the value of the favor of a strong fighting emperor? Hai Bodong said solemnly. The Emperor Do's favor, to me, is worthless. Ning Luo directly attacked. Hai Bodong looked at Ning Luo in surprise. This kid can beat himself at a young age, and he must be a child of some big family. Such a person, perhaps Du Huang's favor, is really worthless. Hai Bodong's eyes dimmed. But, as soon as the voice turned, Hai Bodong's eyes rekindled hope. I can help you. What kind of pill do you need to refine? Ning Luo asked. 6-pin pills, Hai Bodong said hurriedly. Rolled his eyes, Ning Luo helplessly spread out his hands, and now he is only a 4th-rank alchemist, how to make a 6th-rank pill? You can also see that I am a big battle master, do you think I am a 6th-grade alchemist? Ning Luo smiled. Although you are not, but I can see that you have potential. Hai Bodong said. So, are you waiting for me to become a 6th-grade pharmacist to help you refine the pill? Ning Luo asked again. Ning Luo knew that Hai Bodong should have no choice. He was his only life-saving straw. Although he was not a 6th-rank alchemist, he had to grasp this only life-saving straw. As long as you are willing to help me, I am willing to wait. Hai Bodong said. Ning Luo smiled and said, okay, I can help you, but I have to add a condition. What conditions? Hai Bodong asked quickly. I just came to this Tagor desert, and I am not familiar with everything here. Since you can draw such a complete map, it shows that you are very familiar with it. Therefore, I want you to be my tour guide. Ning Luo said lightly. I have Queen Medusa's seal in my body. Once I enter the Tagor desert, she will definitely find it. Hai Bodong said quickly. Dignified Bingwang, this is the guts. Ning Luo sneered. Boy, what do you mean? The Ice Emperor looked at Ning Luo and asked. Ning Luo looked at Hai Dongbo and said directly, if this is the case, then I will leave by myself. You can stay here alone. You, boy, do you dare to look down on me? Okay, I promise you. Hai Dongbo was immediately convinced. And he doesn't even look at Queen Medusa, He is not afraid. What else is he afraid of? You can give me the prescription. Oh, yes, you should also know the rules of asking a pharmacist to refine the pill. Ning Luo smiled at Haibodong and said, bring your own medicinal materials. With a wry smile and nodded. Haibodong naturally knew this rule, but, with a few strands of beard in his dry palm, he said in embarrassment, I have already collected most of the medicinal materials needed for the prescription. But it's still one kind of difference. This medicinal material is called sand mandala. It can only be found in the Tagor desert. The higher the temperature, the easier it is to find. By the way, I have another piece of information about different fire. Haidongbo spread his hands. The word, different fire, entered his ears, and Ning Luo's heart clearly beat hard. The Adam's apple rolled slightly, staring at Haidongbo in front of him with some fiery eyes. Perhaps you should have heard some news about the faint fire in the Tagor desert. Looking at Ning Luo's expression, Haidongbo breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, and said with a smile. Ning Luo nodded slightly, and Ning Luo eagerly said, do you know where is the fire in the Tagor desert? I am very interested in drawing maps. I once went around in the Tagor desert, and I was lucky enough to get some news about unusual fires. I took the root of these news through some detections, although it is still not quite sure where the abnormal fire is. However, it is possible to roughly know which place has the higher probability of having the abnormal fire. Haidongbo smiled triumphantly. Oh, where could the abnormal fire be? Seeing Ning Luo's promise, Haidongbo smiled and nodded, gently took out his palm in his arms, and finally took out a thin piece of parchment and handed it to Ning Luo. He smiled and said, during my exploration, in the Tagor desert, there are 3 places most likely to have abnormal fires. Took the parchment, and Ning Luo spread it out carefully, and found that this was a very detailed map of the Tagor desert. This map was not comparable to the previous maps on the counter. It not only accurately marked the place where the water source exists in the desert, but also carefully marked the Snake Man tribes scattered in the desert. Did you see the 3 flame signs on the map? Haibodong reminded with a smile. Hearing the words, Ning Luo glanced across the map, and as expected, there was a group of extremely conspicuous flame signs in the east, west, and north directions on the map. These 3 places are the places where there is the greatest chance of hiding the alien fire in the Tagor desert. Pointing to the 3 flame marks. Haibodong smiled and said, of course, this is only a place that was inferred after my detection. The accuracy rate can't reach 100%, but it is undoubtedly much better than letting you touch it. You have to remember that it is best to go to the 2 flame marks in the east and the north first, and in the west, if you can, try not to go. The finger stopped on the flame in the west, and Haibodong reminded in a deep voice, road. Why? Because it is already close to the depths of the Tagor desert. Queen Medusa can feel the breath of any human that enters her range. Haibodong sighed with lingering fear. Although what Haidongbo said is very reasonable, Ning Luo is someone who has read the original. Ning Luo remembered that the fire in the heart of Qinglian should be in the snake race. So, even if Ning Luo knew where there was danger, Ning Luo would go there. Okay, then let's go to the west first. As soon as he said this, Haidongbo looked at Ning Luo in astonishment. Where is the territory of Queen Medusa? How can we? Ning Luo interrupted him quickly, and said with a faint smile, I have a hunch that Qinglian's heart is there. In the vast desert, wind and sand were raging. Ning Luo released the wind attributes, and the wind attributes kept on the surface of Ning Luo. Ning Luo has wind attribute energy, so it can directly block the wind and sand. Even in the slowly yellow sand, Ning Luo was not messy at all. The rows of footprints deep in the yellow sand behind him were covered by the wind and sand after a while, hiding all the traces under the desert. In fact, this is also a practice for Ning Luo's wind attribute vindictive energy. He runs the wind attribute energy anytime and anywhere, of course it is a practice. But Haidongbo is not so good. Although he is a fighting spirit, he has ice attribute energy. If it is not for strong vindictiveness, it is impossible to walk in this Tagor desert. However, although the environment of the Great Desert is extremely harsh, the fire attribute energy contained in it may be due to exposure to the sun. If only the fire attribute energy is discussed here, it is almost a bit more majestic than the small valley in the Warcraft Mountains, and the fire attribute energy here is also exceptionally pure and domineering, just perfect for Ning Luo to cultivate Zaihuo Do Qi. After entering the desert for only half a day, Ning Luo could clearly feel that the purple fire fighting spirit flowing in his body was obviously more active and cheerful than before. Hiss! Ning Luo stepped into the yellow sand, and suddenly there was a stern neigh, a cloud of red blood. It penetrates the surface of the yellow sand. The sleeves were swung lightly, and a small beast under the yellow sand was lifted out with a burst of energy. Glanced indifferently at this lost beast. This kind of beast is called the yellow sand demon scorpion, which can only be encountered in the desert, and these things are often hidden in the yellow sand. Is waiting for people to step on it automatically, and they only need to wait and treat others to release venom. Scorpions are very good at hiding, even some humans who walk in the desert all year round are occasionally attacked by them. Therefore, this beast, which is less than the first order level, is often regarded by humans as one of the difficult creatures in the desert. But even if the magic scorpion is good at concealment, in the eyes of Ning Luo, who has excellent soul perception, it is undoubtedly the fireflies in the night, shining, and wanting to conceal a sneak attack. Hey, it is basically impossible. Glanced at the devil scorpion, Ning Luo stepped forward 2 steps, cut its stinger and put it into the ring, then got up, took some heavy steps, and began to walk slowly towards the west. Hai Dongbo next to him looked at Ning Luo with great surprise. This young man was 2 against the sky. He was able to be so calm in the desert, and he wanted to go to the snake man's site. If this child does not die, he will become a mandaki. Ning Luo and Hai Dongbo kept walking towards the west. We have gone deep into the Tagor desert. Next, it should be the territory of the snake man. Shall we continue to move forward? Hai Bodong asked. Ning Luo smiled. Aren't we just here to find Qinglian's heart of fire? Now that Qinglian's heart of fire is not found, how can we leave? However, you must be careful when entering the realm of the snake man. I know you have expert protection by your side, but the snake man is very sinister and cunning. If you get caught in the snake man's trap, I am afraid that the expert behind you will not have time to make a move. Hai Bodong said. Ning Luo didn't panic, and Ning Luo wouldn't let Elder Zan make a move without a last resort. Because I want to be strong, I can't rely on others, I can only rely on myself. At this moment, Ning Luo suddenly heard a few noises. Ning Luo and Hai Dongbo both stopped. It didn't take long before the sand under their feet began to move. Ning Luo understood that there might be a battle waiting for him. As expected, after a while, snake people suddenly came from all directions, surrounding Ning Luo and Hai Dongbo in the middle. Humans, those who trespass into the forbidden area of the snake clan, kill without mercy. The relationship between snake people and humans was not good, but now that Ning Luo and Hai Dongbo enter the realm of snake people, they can't help but do it directly. These snake men are not strong, they are just fighters and masters, and there are no snake men above the master. Summoning the fighting gauze, Ning Luo sighed, palms gently swept, looking at the panicked snake people on the opposite side. There was a sneer at the corners of his mouth, and the palms of his feet slammed on the ground. With an explosion, Ning Luo the figure was close to the sand and rushed out. Bang! Appeared in front of a 9-star fighter and snake man. Ning Luo's eyes were indifferent, the purple fire in his hand mixed with fierce energy, slammed on the opponent's chest fiercely, and immediately followed with a slight muffled noise. The snake man's eyes shrank suddenly, and then a mouthful of blood mixed with broken internal organs, spewed out wildly. At the same time, his body shot out like a cannonball, and finally shot into a sand dune. Between the electric light and flint, this 9-star fighter had not even had the time to perform fighting skills, but suffered a fatal attack from Ning Luo. It can be seen from this that now Ning Luo, dealing with fighters, has been so simple. In the blink of an eye, he killed a 9-star fighter snake man. Ning Luo suddenly made a mistake. He once again came between the other 4 and 5-star fighter snake man. The flames in his hand waved them. The snakes flee in panic, all of them vomiting blood and flying. Seeing that just a few rounds, it was convenient for the loss to be so heavy, and a bloodthirsty scorpion suddenly surged in the triangular eyes of the leading snake man, facing the only other 9-star fighter snake man. After a glance, there was a fierce light on his face. Holding a sharp snake spear tightly in his hand, the snake's tail twisted strangely on the surface of the sand. The two formed into a figure eight and furiously attacked Ning Luo. Seeing the skillful cooperation of the two, it is obvious that after a long time of training, the two snake spears are weirdly protruding. Between the snake spears, a faint scarlet is looming, and it is obviously painted with poison. The purple fire in his hand slapped the last snake man into the air, feeling the cold energy coming from behind him. Ningluo Zaihuo then moved away, and with a clank, he fisted the two pierced snake spears down. Although Ningluo possesses Bone Spirit Cold Fire Ningluo has not been exposed. This Bone Spirit Cold Fire Ningluo wants to keep it as a whole card. Puff! Seeing that the attack was blocked, the two snake men almost suddenly opened their mouths at the same time, and two stinky quiet green gases sprayed quickly towards Ningluo. Snake venom. Ningluo was a little surprised, but he was a great fighting master. The fighting chi gauze outside Ningluo's body was surging rapidly, and then all parts of Ningluo's body were wrapped in it, and anyone who came into contact with the purple fire gauze cyan poisonous gas. All were burned into nothingness, and gradually lifted off to dissipate. With an indifferent expression on his face, Ningluo suddenly stepped on the sole of his foot, and his figure instantly appeared in front of the leading snake man. Zihuo raised his hand quickly, then smashed his head away fiercely. Ningluo, who suddenly passed through the poisonous gas, made the face of the leader snake change wildly. At the moment of crisis, the tail of the snake suddenly swayed strangely. With a strange sound of shuttles, the body suddenly crawled halfway like a snake and backed a few meters. Dangerously avoided Ningluo's fatal attack. After avoiding Ningluo's attack, the leader of the snake still felt a little unsafe. The snake's tail swayed rapidly and the figure quickly backed away. However, the retreat just lasted for a few seconds, and a weird violent suction burst out from the palm of Ningluo not far away. Suddenly, the unprepared snakehead leader. He was sucked and flew towards Ningluo again. Raised his eyes and looked at the leading snake man flying in fear. Ningluo sneered, and the soles of his feet slammed on the ground again. The body was like a big pung, swiftly pulling up, then flashed to the top of the snake man's head, and the purple fire in his hand crashed down. Boom! Blood sprinkled down from the air accompanied by brain pulp. A section of the body quickly fell, and then was smashed into the yellow sand. After a while, the yellow sand pit was also in the flowing yellow sand, gradually disappearing. Watching the death of the leader, the last snake man of the 9-star combatant also had a touch of fear on his face, and a few sharp nays in his mouth. Then the snake's tail swung, and his body quickly fled toward the depths of the desert. Get rid of the leading snake man. Ningluo's body volleyed, his body whirled slightly, with the help of the power of rotation. Zanzihuo in his hand violently dropped out, and shot at the fleeing snake man. Puff Kai! The purple fire flashed across the sky like lightning, and quickly caught up with the snake man, and finally shot out from his neck, and plunged into the yellow sand with red blood. So far, all the snake people have been solved by Ningluo. As for why he did it by himself, it was because Ningluo regarded all this as a practice, and only by doing it himself could he improve himself. Hai Bodong looked at Ningluo, who had killed the snake man, and after a brief operation, he knew that he was not wronged when he lost to Ningluo. Deep in the territory of the snake man, an enchanting figure stood still. Only her back could be seen, but her water snake waist was very thin. No matter who saw it, it would be full of imagination. Report. A snake man came to the snake girl and knelt down. Say. Snake girl gave a soft voice, and the endless charm voice radiated. It is reported that 2 humans broke into our snake man territory, a fighting spirit, and a big fighting division. Our patrol team was killed by them. The snake man's subordinates said immediately. Oh, it's been a long time since there was such an interesting thing. In that case, I will meet them, said the enchanting snake girl. The vast desert, golden sand, is the only main theme here. The squally wind carries the sand, sweeping across the sky and the earth, and the wind roars endlessly. On a sand dune, Xiaoyan, with his upper body naked, is frowning and looking at the map in his hand. It has been 10 days since he entered the Tagor desert, and after more than 10 days of walking, Xiaoyan was finally close to the range of the flame mark on the map, but after entering this range yesterday, Xiaoyan still did not find any traces of abnormal fire after a whole day of searching. Is this the Tagor desert? It's so hot. Xiao Yan raised the sheepskin map in his hand, looked up at Yao Lao floating in midair, frowning and grinning bitterly. The fire attribute is strong here, which is why I want you to come here to practice. Yao Lao slowly lowered his body, a little helpless. This time, I must find a different fire, practice Fen Ju, and defeat Ning Luo. Xiao Yan said firmly. The shame he once suffered is still vivid in Xiao Yan's heart. It is precisely because of this that Xiao Yan has endless motivation and wants to continue to catch up with Ning Luo. Gave a wry smile, Xiao Yan sighed again, and habitually touched the huge profound ruler behind his palm, then raised his foot to face the sand sea within his sight. Against the scorching sun, Xiao Yan walked again, sweating profusely for nearly half an hour, and when he was about to stop and rest, his brows suddenly raised. Turning his head, looking at the sand dune not far away, there, a figure flees in embarrassment as he descends the sand dune. One was unstable and rolled directly down. Sha Bai slightly frowned and watched the figure that rolled down all the way, and finally rolled not far in front of him. Xiao Yan shook his head helplessly. Stepped forward, took out a bag of clear water from the ring, and dumped it on the man's face. Under the stimulation of the water source, the man who fell into a coma gradually opened his eyes and looked at Xiao Yan, who appeared in front of him. He was surprised at first, and he was relieved after discovering that he had never had any bad intentions. Glanced at the man faintly. Xiao Yan randomly took out 2 or 3 bottles of water from Naji, then threw it beside the man, turned and left. In the bottom of his heart, Xiao Yan never thought that he was a bad person with a bodhisattva heart. He met a wounded stranger in this desert, and being able to give him some water is the biggest bottom line. If he still wants him leaving to protect you all the way out of the desert, then I can only apologize. Little brother. He looked at Xiao Yan, who turned and walked without a trace. The man was slightly startled, and then hurriedly said hoarsely, "Little brother, please stay. Our mercenary team was attacked by snake men and is now at a critical juncture. Please also go to Shimo City to help and ask for help. Sorry, I don't have time." Without looking back, Xiao Yan raised his hand and said faintly, "This can't be blamed on his indifference. There are countless people dying in this world every day. Does anyone have to help relocate soldiers by themselves? Since you are a mercenary in the Tagor desert, you should naturally have this kind of consciousness of fate." Little brother. Seeing Xiao Yan as he walked away gradually, the man gritted his teeth and squirmed, shouting with all his strength, "Little brother, please help. If the team can be rescued, our Modi mercenary corps will definitely be rewarded with a lot of money." Quote. The man's shout fell, but the young man who was about to disappear into the sand in the distance suddenly paused. After an instant, he turned and walked back and came to him under the ecstatic gaze of the man. The Modi mercenary group. The Modi mercenary group of Shimo City. Xiao Yan blinked, and there was a little surprise in his dark eyes. What a coincidence. It's the land. Little brother has heard of our mercenary group. Upon seeing this, the man was a little bit unsure whether Xiao Yan was malicious or kind to the Modi mercenary group, but in this case, he had to bite the bullet. Road. The name of your team leader. Xiao Ding. Xiao Li. The man licked his dry lips and said cautiously. Oh. Xiao Yan nodded slightly, and the smile on Xiao Yan's face softened a lot. He actually squatted down, looked at the injury on the man's thigh with his fingers, and then threw him a pill. "Take it, put it first. The snake venom is depleted." "Thank you, little brother." The man hurriedly took the pill, and the man gratefully swallowed it into his stomach. "This is healing medicine, apply some by yourself. It shouldn't be a big deal. After applying it, take me to your mercenary team." Xiao Yan took out a small bottle of healing medicine from the ring, threw it to the man again, and stood up, clapped his hands and smiled. "Ah, go there." Hearing the words, the man was surprised and hurriedly said, "Little brother, that's not okay. There are 8 snakemen besieging our team, and 3 of them are 9-star fighters. Little brother, you should hurry up to Shimo City and inform us of the mercenary group. The head of them will come over immediately. The distance here is not far away." The man persuaded him bitterly. "Stop talking nonsense, quickly apply the medicine, and then lead the way. I can do this naturally with my certainty, otherwise your person will be dead when they bring people over." A light kick on the man's thigh, Xiao Yan rolled his eyes. Urged. Listening to Xiao Yan's words, the man looked at the former again suspiciously. The boy with a naked back, a pair of shorts, a rather weird black ruler. All these made the man unable to figure out what the boy in front of him was like. Strength. Gave a wry smile, the man put the healing medicine on his thigh, and then stood up trembling a little. After pointing his finger at the dune, he said, "It's not far from there." He glanced at the sand dunes. Xiaoyan nodded slightly, grabbed the man's arm, and his feet suddenly stepped on the sand. With a dull explosion, a huge sand pit was shaken out of the sand. With the help of this reverse thrust, Xiaoyan and the man's figure suddenly rushed onto the sand dunes. Climbing up the sand dune, Xiaoyan once again skimmed a distance like lightning, and finally stopped on a towering sand surface, and threw the dumbfounded man in his hand to the ground. Step forward, looking at the crowds of people appearing in the desert below. In the desert below, more than a dozen mercenaries are holding their backs with their weapons around them. It is surrounded by 8 strange-looking creatures. These creatures have human heads and bodies, but the parts of their feet turned out to be a huge snake tail. The squeaking sound of the snake tail made the people slightly chilling. "Are these the snake men of the Tagor desert?" Xiaoyan exclaimed as he glanced over the 8 male snake men. It was eye-opening, but this was the first time he saw this creature. Xiaoyan rescued them, and then followed them back to the Modi mercenary corps. The Modi mercenary corps was the site of his brothers Xiao Ding and Xiao Li, so of course Xiaoyan had to visit his brothers. Deep in the desert, above the clear sky, the huge scorching sun hangs high above the sky, like a big fireball constantly releasing flames. The hot sunlight is swayed in the golden desert, and the tiny sand particles, smoked and roasted like small iron nuggets burning red. In the desert, due to the hot temperature, wisps of heat seep out from the yellow sand, and finally evaporate the space into a twist and illusion. "Master Ning, we are going to the Snake Man tribe soon, shall we continue to move forward?" Hai Dongbo asked. "I haven't seen the beauty of Queen Medusa, how can I go now?" Ning Luo smiled. Now, it has been 2 months since Ning Luo came to the Tagor desert. During this time, his improvement was not small. In 2 months, he was promoted from a 6-star master to an 8-star master. 1 star a month, this kind of terrifying speed of cultivation, even the Ice Emperor Hai Dongbo couldn't help but marvel. At first, he could only improve by 1 star a year, and in the end he became Do Huang. The kid in front of him, I am afraid that in the future, he may become Do Zong, or even higher. At this time, he and Hai Dongbo came to an oasis. Above this oasis, there is a tribe of snake people. In the tribe of snake people, there are usually strong fighting spirits, even fighting kings. Hai Dongbo is still more afraid of snake people, so he took Ning Luo around the snake people tribes along the way, but now they have to supply supplies, so they have to enter this oasis. Ning Luo was fearless, took a step forward, striding quickly towards the oasis in the distance. Wangshan ran to death, and this map can also kill people. Although the route is only a little slender, Ning Luo walked for nearly 3 hours until the sky gradually darkened, and the oasis was lush, just quietly revealed a corner. Looking at the small oasis located in a plain, Ning Luo breathed a sigh of relief, and quickly dived towards the oasis in the slightly dim sky. Gradually approached the oasis, and the surrounding sultry air became cooler. Ning Luo looked around and finally jumped into the lush jungle, his figure gradually being hidden. Ning Luo took a sigh of relief after sniffing the fragrance of the grass next to him. In the desert, even a little green can make people feel precious. Touching his chin with his palm, Ning Luo's body slowly shuttled among the trees, looking around, constantly looking for the place where the water source exists. With Ning Luo's gradual scan, he also gradually entered the depths of the oasis. Just when he felt a little irritated because he could not find the water source for a long time, not far in front, there was a slight noise. The sound of water. Listening to the sound of water, Ning Luo breathed a sigh of relief. The heat in his heart was almost annihilated by the crisp sound of water, but when he was about to rush out of the jungle, he swept through the gaps in the woods. There was a sudden gaze when he went out, and immediately his body squatted down, and his breathing was suppressed to the lowest point. At the end of a small road outside the bushes, a few slender snake girls are standing still with cold faces and sharp eyes, constantly sweeping through the surrounding jungle. The weapons in their hands seem to be ready to strike at any time. Kill anyone who breaks in randomly. These snake girls may be due to the desert environment. Their skin is quite dark, and they have a slightly beautiful appearance. With the strange diamond-shaped pupils, they look faintly charming. What's more, the most interesting thing about snake people is their attractive waists like water snakes. In the human world, whenever there are snake people female slaves performing that exotic dance, they look around. It's not uncommon for a man to be flushed and ashamed on the spot if his concentration is not strong. Of course, now Ningluo is naturally not interested in admiring the charming water snake waists of several beautiful snake girls. After seeing these female snake people for the first time, his face is slightly ugly. Because TOEFL is based on excellent soul perception, he discovered that among these female snake people, there are actually 4 strong masters at the level of big fighting masters, and the rest are all fighting masters. I rely on, at this time, what are they doing in clusters here? Looking at the somewhat powerful snake girl in the lineup, Ningluo's mouth was full of bitterness, and he gave a low, bitter smile, turned his eyes, and suppressed his breath to the lowest level. Click, and then slowly moved his body, quietly facing the place where the sound of water had come from, and walking cautiously. With the help of the darkening sky, Ningluo luckily avoided the glance of the dry snake girl, and finally followed the sound of water, gradually approaching the water source area. With fingers quietly peeling away the cover of the leaves, Ningluo projected his gaze, and what appeared in his sight was a clear lake with clean water. Ningluo, who had been running out of water for a day, couldn't help but swallowed it. Few saliva. Puff. Just as Ningluo was happily planning to show up to take water, there was a slight sound of breaking water, but his eyes were pulled away. Suddenly, his body suddenly stiffened, his mouth was slightly opened, and he stared at the open lake surface in a daze. Figure. In the clear lake, a woman with a fierce figure rushed from the bottom of the lake, turned her back to Ningluo and flicked her long hair pressed against her snow-white scented shoulders, and a drop of water was stained with the balm. On top of the breakable skin, then along the fragrant shoulders, slid across the tempting waist, and finally dripped into the lake, splashing a circle of ripples. Although the distance is a bit far apart, Ningluo can still clearly see how flexible the tight waist is, and it makes people feel dry. The woman's slender hand casually wrapped her long hair, and then slowly turned around. As the woman's body turned, the naked and perfect body was immediately exposed to Ningluo's sight. At the moment, someone who was still a virgin immediately rushed to some blood. The perfect body carved from white jade is like a masterpiece from heaven, a face under the faint moonlight, charming and enchanting. Among the beautiful diamond-shaped eyes, there are wisps of water like spring. Ningluo can be sure that this is not Queen Medusa, but she can be regarded as a beautiful snake girl. At this moment, a voice came out. Little brother, since he's here, why don't you come to accompany the slave mandarin ducks in the water? The charming voice instantly entered Ningluo's ears. As soon as the voice fell, the snake girl slapped the surface of the lake fiercely, and a water arrow rose, her red lips slightly opened, and a mouthful of green venom was sprayed into it, and then the poisonous water arrow was facing Ningluo Suo. The hiding place bursts away. Although the words in Snake Girl's mouth were as gentle as lovers' flirtation, it was extremely vicious when Ningluo was shot by a poisoned arrow. Fortunately, after Ningluji noticed the horror of the Snake Girl's strength, he kept putting his mind on her body, seeing her instantly cruel her. When the soles of the feet slammed on the ground, the figure suddenly rushed out. Kai! The water arrow hit the air, and the bush where it fell, suddenly withered into dry wood in the blink of an eye. The corner of his eye glanced at the large withered trees in the place where he had stood before. Ningluo couldn't help taking a breath. The poison of this woman is too strong, isn't it? Hee, so handsome. I didn't expect to be a handsome little guy. Seeing that Ningluo rushed out of the bushes, the snake girl in the lake brightened her eyes, and she didn't mind that her upper body was naked and exposed to the former. In his sight, he smiled and said authentically. Ningluo ate the face pill. Even if it looks like a snake man, Ningluo is also very handsome. Hee, eldest sister, take your time to wash. I'm just passing by. Ningluo gave a dry smile at the snake girl. Facing the lake, Ningluo quickly backed away. Looking at Ningluo backing like lightning, the snake girl's red lips slightly lifted. The slender jade onion fingers slowly lifted up, and then suddenly began to dance like dancing. Following the movement of the snake girl's slender fingers, in the dense jungle, a cold energy suddenly blasted towards Ningluo's back. sensed the cold energy coming from behind him. Ning Luo was slightly startled, his body trembled slightly, the purple flames possessed his body, and he flicked his fingers. A ray of purple flame shot towards the rear, and finally collided with the cold energy. With a slight sound, the purple fire gradually dissipated, and the cold energy turned into a colorful snake, but this little snake has become a roasted snake. His eyes swept across the colorful snake. The corner of Ning Luo's eyes jumped. Although this thing seemed small, it was extremely poisonous. Even if a fighting master was hit by it, it would endanger his life if he didn't detoxify it in time. The little guy is a bit capable, but in this jungle, there are more than 1,000 poisonous snakes hidden. Do you want to kill all of them one by one? He glanced at the killed snake lightly. The snake girl's red lips slightly opened, and a strange sound wave came from her mouth. With the sound wave coming out, in the woods, the sound of rustling suddenly rang, but for a short while, above the trees around Ning Luo, there were actually densely packed various kinds of venomous snakes. These venomous snakes opened their cold triangular pupils and stared at Ning Luo below. Only when the snake girl gave an order, the deadly venom would erupt all over the world. Looking at the dense snakes around, Ning Luo felt a little surprised. No wonder this woman could detect her own trail before. It turned out that she had forgotten that they had the ability to manipulate poisonous snakes. It was tantamount to putting countless eyeliners in this dense forest. Ah, I'm afraid they would be eyeing you the moment I first entered the oasis, right? Master Yueme, do you need to kill him? In the woods, the figure flickered. The snake girls who had been guarding the road in front suddenly appeared on the surrounding tree trunks, staring coldly at Ning Luo, softly asked. Hehe, don't worry, I haven't seen any human beings who dared to go deep here for a long time. The snake girl called Yumidi smiled charmingly, and the snake's tail swung back to the shore gracefully, and then stood naked by the river. Two human shadows appeared behind Yume, covering the latter's body with a black robe, concealing the spring light that was enough to make the man's blood boil. Let her subordinates wear the black robe for her. Yume Xian fingered the blue silk on her forehead, and smiled and said to Ning Luo, the little guy who killed my people before, should it be you? At the end of the talk, Ning Luo could already clearly feel the coldness in Yume's charming smile. Hehe, you guessed it, I did kill those people of your tribe. Ning Luo spread his hands. Little brother, you are still so calm now, do you have any confidence? Yume looked at Ning Luo and asked. Ning Luo's spiritual power was released, and he discovered that he had been completely surrounded by snake men, and there were many big fighting masters who surrounded him. The snake girl in front of her should be Yume, who has reached the realm of King Do. Ning Luo knew that it was difficult to walk, and since he couldn't walk, he didn't leave. Isn't my sister trying to play with me in the Mandarin ducks? I'm leaving, isn't my sister very lonely? Ning Luo smiled. Yueme didn't expect Ning Luo to say that, which surprised her a bit. Because she had never seen a human being so calm in front of her, this added a bit of her interest. Little guy, you killed my tribe, and you are so calm, are you really afraid of death? Yume sneered. Hehe, sister joked, elder sister thinks she can kill me. Ning Luo said lightly. Listening to Ning Luo's slightly mocking words, Yume's pretty face was cold, her charming smile gradually reduced, and she said faintly, if this is the case, then you can stay here as the nourishment for the oasis. Kill him. With a light wave, Yume said lightly. Filled with Sen Lang's killing intent. Listening to Yume's order, the snake girls around suddenly no longer suppressed their killing intent on humans, and their figures flashed quickly. The poisonous spear in his hand, under the moonlight, glowed with a deep luster, and attacked and killed Ning Luo below. Ha! Feeling the killing intent coming from all directions, Ning Luo looked at Yume quietly, without any fear or moving half a step. On his body, the heavenly drive Yu beast turned on instantly, and instantly suppressed the snake human race. Then his eyes suddenly turned red. The pupil of control opened instantly, and a powerful spiritual force burst out instantly. All the people who came up were still in place instantly. They were controlled by Ning Luo's controlling pupil in an instant. Even if it was Yume, her mental power was far inferior to Ning Luo, so even if she made Ning Luo a realm, she is now completely controlled by Ning Luo. Ning Luo was a little surprised. Before he used the Eye of Control, he was a person whose control strength was much worse than his own. He hadn't controlled someone stronger than himself. Now seeing that he controls Yueme, Ningluo didn't expect this eye of control. So strong. Although Ningluo can control Yueme, Yueme is better than himself after all. He doesn't know how long he can control it, so he has no time to do something shameful. However, with such enchanting figures, they seem to be sorry for not doing anything. Ningluo thought, his evil eyes smiled, attention all, give master climb. Suddenly, all the snake girls twisted the waist of the water snake and got up on the ground. Looking at Ningluo who was crawling on the ground, he felt a strong sense of satisfaction. However, he didn't dare to die. After all, Yu Mei is a strong Duwang. If he wakes up, he will not be an opponent, and Elder Zan would not act for Duwang, although Elder Zan would not help him. Dead, but if you are beaten and disabled, it still hurts. So Ningluo didn't care about those coquettish **** underground, so Zion wing opened and flew up. At this time, Yu Mei woke up. I saw myself crawling on the ground. Suddenly, she was stunned. What did this kid do? Let yourself crawl on the ground. She released her mental power, and immediately, the snake girls were all lifted up and woke up. They looked into the sky. Ningluo flicked his wings, waved his hands to the stunned snake girls below, and laughed. Bye, you guys should continue to take a bath, I really just passed by. Fighting Chi Wai. Seeing the wings behind Ningluo, a touch of shock appeared on Yu Mei's pretty face, but after a while, she frowned and shook her head. No. It's not Do Chi Wai. This should be a flying combat skill. Little guy, it's really getting more and more interesting. How could my sister let you go like this? She covered her red lips and ate a smile. Yu Mei's smiling eyebrows contained a bit of cold-killing intent. She looked up at Ningluo, which was flying out of the oasis rapidly, and waved to the snake girl around. Said indifferently, you go back to the tribe first, let me see if this little guy can escape from my hand. Yes, my lord. Upon hearing the words, several snake girls who were just about to chase down immediately stopped and bowed respectfully to Yu Mei, then jumped into the jungle without hesitation, and quickly disappeared. After all the snake girls had retreated, Yu Mei slowly raised her pretty face, looking at the back, who could almost only see a small black spot, smiled slightly, her smile enchantingly. The body trembled slightly, and a pair of huge wings slowly formed behind Yu Mei. After an instant, it solidified into a pair of light blue energy wings. Wings moved slightly, Yu Mei's body quickly lifted into the air, and then she chased after the stars and the moon in the direction where Ningluo was fleeing. Hee hee, little guy, if people know that a little big fight master can escape from my Yueme, he won't be laughed to death by those guys in the future. In the shady oasis, with Yu Mei's laughter gradually disappeared, and she returned to her former calm once again. The huge silver moon hangs high, and the faint moon blossoms spread all over the desert, covering it with a layer of silver yarn. Shoo! In the quiet desert, a sound of breaking wind suddenly sounded from far to near. After a while, a dark shadow suddenly emerged from the northern sky, and then slammed across the air, due to the intense wind pressure generated by the high speed. It turned out to be a huge sandpit tunnel that was hundreds of meters long in the desert. Amidst the yellow sand in the sky, the black shadow gradually disappeared to the edge of the sky. However, the flying yellow sand has not yet completely landed. Another black shadow rushed in again, and the more fierce flying speed directly reduced the previous one. The bunker passage left by the shadow has doubled again. Yu Mei hung behind Ningluo not far and near, looking at his figure who was chasing away embarrassedly. She couldn't help but smiled charmingly, and chuckled softly, little guy. Let's go to the tribe with my sister. You are not the most human beings. Do you like to use our snake girl as a slave? Then I will take you as my slave, okay. The voice of a chuckle, carried by a ray of anger, accurately passed into Ningluo's ears ahead. Ningluo didn't expect Yu Mei to catch up so quickly. Even if she had wind attribute fighting skills, her speed did not exceed Yu Mei's speed. If you can catch up with me, I will make you hay. Although Yu Mei's voice was soft and delicate, Ningluo could still hear some cold-killing intent from it, and he was not polite at the moment, turning his head and speaking loudly. The sharp-toothed kid. Hearing Ningluo's shout, Yu Meichao's face was slightly cold, her silver teeth bit her, and her delicate hands suddenly protruded. 5 faint green energy burst out, and in the intertwining, finally condensed into 5 huge energy green snakes. The energy green snake broke through the obstacles of the air like lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it came to Ningluo's back. Suddenly, with a huge mouth full of fangs, he bit down Ningluo's back fiercely. Ningluo looked at the 5 giant green snakes that appeared behind him with his head tilted, and Ningluo was startled. The body hurriedly twisted strangely, avoiding the 5 energy cyan bites in a thrilling manner. While Ningluo was flying, 2 shadows suddenly appeared from the eastern sky. Not far behind the 2 shadows, a large black spot was also looming. Haha, I just said that there is a snake man breath here, it is true, and it looks like a guy with a good background. The figure quickly grew from small to big, and a rough laugh was carried by the grudge. Resounded through this desert world. Boom! Above the sky, the 2 silhouettes that were flashing quickly stopped suddenly, and the sharp wind-breaking energy sounded like a thunder in the air. Raised his head in astonishment, Ningluo looked at the 2 figures appearing above his head. His pupils suddenly tightened, and after a long while, he swallowed with a swallow in his throat. 2 strong fighting kings. When these 2 people appeared, Yu Mei's pretty face underneath also became extremely dignified. His eyes shifted away from Ningluo's body, and then coldly glanced at the 2 in midair. Soon after the 2 appeared, a loud roar was also resounding, and the black spot in the distance gradually became larger. After a while, a huge monster of beast on the green ground gradually appeared in the sky above the desert. Hee, there are people. The huge monster stayed in midair, and a loud laugh came out. Then 6 shadows jumped down from the back of the monster, and finally landed lightly on a sand dune not far from Ningluo. Above. His eyes hurriedly swept across the 6 shadows that fell on the ground. Ningluo's already constricted pupils were now almost the size of a needle eye, because he discovered that among the 6 people, 5 of them were strong at the Douling level. The leading middle-aged man turned out to be a strong fighting king. On the face, there was a shock. In Ningluo's heart, at this moment, it was as if the river was overwhelmed. There are 5 strong fighting spirits and 3 strong fighting kings. Ningluo remembered that at this time, King Dan Guhe should also want to grab the heart of Qinglian. It seems that these people are from King Dan Guhe. But Yun Yun should not be able to help Furukawa, there should be no Yun Yun in the team. Ningluo looked at the figures, their figures gradually became clear, and sure enough, the head of the Do King was the Dan King Furukawa. Ningluo discovered that the man was Guhe, and immediately dived into the desert and hid him. He secretly looked at the 6 people who had jumped from the monster. Yu Mei's shocked expression was filled with horror. His eyes swept across the black-robed man with dread. Regardless of Ningluo, his figure instantly retreated tens of meters, staring at the people coldly, and sneered, "What kind of wind is blowing in this desert tonight? The strong people who are rarely seen on weekdays like to become are you in a group? Hee, I didn't expect that I had just arrived in the Great Desert not long after I met a strong man of the Duong level. Presumably your excellency should be a leader of the 8 major tribes of the snake race, right?" The young man took a step slowly, looked at Yu Mei in the distance with a smile, and said with a smile, "Who are you? Why come to the depths of my clan late at night? Don't you know that this place is forbidden for your humans to enter?" The charming smile on Yu Mei's pretty face has completely faded at this time, and replaced by a forest. Cold solemnly. Obviously, in front of this horror lineup that suddenly appeared, she no longer had any idleness to joke. Hee, our trip to the Tagor Desert is indeed something important. I wonder if your excellency can take us into the depths of the desert. Meet the noble queen, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Want to see your majesty the queen? Upon hearing this, Yu Mei's beautiful eyes suddenly curved into a beautiful and dangerous arc, and she sneered, "Our snake-human race has been guilty with your humans for many years, and each other's hands are covered with each other's blood. What can be discussed? If you are acquainted, I advise you to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the 8 chiefs of our snake-human tribe gather together, the strong class of the Gamma Empire will probably shrink drastically. Lao He, I said a long time ago, don't try to negotiate with the snake man. They don't eat this set." Above the air, a stubborn man bowed his head and shouted at the middle-aged man. The voice of the big man, like an angry thunder, rang through the air. After a while, it gradually weakened and even disappeared. "I know this woman. The leader of the snake tribe among the 8 tribes of the snake people. Hey, the Gamma Empire fought the snake people. The old guy Rainer fought with her, but in the end it seemed to have suffered a bit. The big man glanced at her. She glanced at the enchanting Yume and said with a smile. Reina, you said that you were the old man who practiced the lightning attribute technique during the war. I don't know the poison on his body, but now it has been solved. Yume's lips sneered and sneered. Thanks to you, although the poison is detoxified, it is equivalent to crippling an arm. The big man said faintly, glancing at Yume's eyes and passing a cold light. Lao He, let's catch her directly, don't waste time anymore, otherwise, if you are late, you will probably have nothing you want, and if she runs away, it may be difficult for our trip. The degree is going to rise a lot. The big man bowed his head to the middle-aged humane. Hearing that, the middle-aged man called Lao He pondered a little, nodded slightly, and said helplessly, since your excellency refuses to cooperate, don't blame us for deceiving less, Lao He lion, Feng Li, trouble. In the last sentence, the middle-aged man raised his head and said to the big man in midair and another old man with a weak body. No problem, I have long wanted to learn about the power of the snake-human clan. Hearing the words of the middle-aged man, the big Han immediately patted his chest and smiled without hesitation. Another old man with a thin body hesitated slightly. Obviously he was a little self-reliant on his identity and didn't want the two of them to join together. However, the hesitation only lasted for a moment before he threw it out. He also knew very well that he was behind in the task of how much difficulty will be added to one's own side by a strong fighter. The bodies of the two trembled slightly, then turned into two black lines, and they appeared directly not far from Ueme. The sudden increase in the speed of their bodies actually caused the air to produce a little sonic boom. Yanshi. Standing on the sand dunes, the big man raised his head slightly and reported his name in a deep voice. This is a little courtesy among the strong. Feng Li, the old man said thinly. Listening to these two names, Yume's heart beat fiercely. Ha, these two people turned out to be the famous Lion King Yensha, ranked among the 10 strongest in the Gamma Empire, and Feng Li the Windrunner. Looking at the tall and thin figure in the distance, Yume was stunned. I couldn't help but took a breath. It is almost rare to see these high-ranking powerhouses on weekdays, but tonight, she saw the two at the same time in one breath. I said, who has the courage to break into the depths of my clan? It turns out to be two of the top 10 strong men of the Gamma Empire. In his tone of voice, he sneered softly, but Yume's pretty face became more and more serious. It became solemn. Although she has never fought against these two people, she has heard of their reputations. There are no mediocre talents under their fame. These two people can be ranked among the top 10 powerhouses of the Gamma Empire, and naturally they have their superiority. Place. With Yume's strength, if she fights with one of them, she will not have the slightest fear, but if it is one enemy too, that's a bit difficult. Besides, apart from these two people, the black-robed man who has been silent is the one who makes Yu the most taboo, Do Huang, that's only Her Majesty that can match the superpower. Ah. Why do these people suddenly gather in the Great Desert? There must be demons when things go wrong. No matter what their purpose is, I must send this information to Her Majesty the Queen. Otherwise, with their lineup, there is no one of the 8 tribes can compete with them alone. Thoughts flashed in her heart. Yume no longer hesitated and talked nonsense. The slender hands quickly formed a strange handprint, and at the same time, the snake's tail lightly patted on the sand surface, followed by a slight muffled sound. Suddenly, the calm sand dune suddenly exploded, and a huge sand wave instantly formed in front of Yume, and then smashed toward everyone. Do it. Seeing that Yume was the first to do it, Yan Shi was not polite, and he gave a low drink, then raised his head and opened his hands. The sound wave of a pale silver lion roar suddenly spread out from his wide-open mouth. Where the sound wave spreads, the waves of sand hit hard, instantly solidified, and finally fell weakly. When Yan Shi broke the sand waves, Feng Li on the side trembled slightly, and suddenly disappeared for a moment. After that sand wave, it was a wave of fierce energy fluctuations. Yan Shi also took an almost arrogant posture after breaking the opponent's sand wave attack. He rushed into the battle circle not far away, and suddenly, huge sandy gully, tens of meters long, continuously emerged among the fierce shots. Between the yellow sand flying in the sky, Yu Meihan had a pretty face, and in the palm of her palm, two faint green energies condensed into huge green snakes. The two huge green snakes are not only covered with hard scales, between the opening and closing of the huge mouth, the sharp white fangs flashed out. What shocked people the most was that the green snake seemed to have vitality. Two faint fierce auras emanating from its body, weird. During the sudden raid, Yan Shi and Feng Li were reluctantly resisted. It has long been heard that some powerhouses of the snake human race can extract the souls of beasts, and then use them to cultivate unique skills. Such skills can not only preserve most of the strengths in front of the beasts, but also under the master's drive, he can become fierce and not afraid of death. It is extremely troublesome to fight against each other. When I saw it today, it turned out to be true. Looking at the yellow sand flying in the field with violent energy, the middleman, the young man, said slightly in surprise. Elder, it seems that the two adults don't seem to be able to clean her up right away. Do we need to go there too? A man approached the middle-aged man and said respectfully. Hearing this, the middle-aged man turned his head slightly and stared at the mysterious man who was covered in black robe. As if perceiving his gaze, the black-robed man shook his head slightly, and his pair of gazes under the black hood looked again at the young man who was shocked by the fierce battle on the sand dune not far away, which means inexplicable. Seeing the behavior of the black-robed man, the middle-aged man nodded slightly, pondered slightly, and whispered, "Forget it, with the strength of the old lion and Feng Li, she is just trying to support it. After a while, the winner will win." Self-divided. Yes, Gongsheng replied. This dueling-level man who had dominated the title of the strongest in a large city once swept the black-robed man on the side in awe, but slowly backed away. Boom! A violent energy explosion suddenly sounded, splashing yellow sand in the sky. After a while, the yellow sand gradually swayed and fell, and three interlaced shadows shot out of each other. The three pairs of eyes interlaced in midair, all of which contained undisguised murderous aura. Looking at the field where the battle suddenly calmed down, Ning Luo found that among the three, Yu Mei, whose pretty face appeared pale, was obviously at a disadvantage, and that Yan Shi and Feng Li were fighting together because they were fighting together. It's just that the clothes are a little broken, and the breath is still stable and strong, obviously not hurt. What a shameless human. I am indeed not the opponent of the two of you, but in this desert, if I want to go, you are not qualified to stop me. The plump asterisk gently undulated, and Yu Mei was in. After a preliminary test of the opponent's strength, he completely gave up the idea of hard work, sneered, and his hands began to quickly form a few knots in front of him. Stop her. Seeing the sudden violent anger on Yu Mei's body, Yan Shi frowned and shouted. As soon as his voice fell, Feng Li on the side instantly turned into a wisp of breeze, shooting away at Yu Mei like lightning. Snake skill. Differentiation. With a sneer watching the breeze coming from the lightning, Yu Mei's body trembled suddenly, and then suddenly exploded in the stunned eyes of everyone. In the explosion, there was no splash of flesh and blood, but countless green energy giant snakes gushing out from the explosion place. As soon as these giant snakes appeared, they galloped away in all directions overwhelmingly. What a weird snake skill. He waved a dozen times of fighting spirits and smashed hundreds of energy giant snakes into nothingness. Yan Shi looked at the almost endless energy giant snake with a solemn expression. When the energy giant snake was flying in the sky, a few people stood by. Except for the mysterious black-robed man, the others were shots instantly, and within a very fast time, all the energy snakes above the half-wall of the sky were knocked into nothingness. However, even so, there are still many floor drains. The fish of the net got into the sand. Oh, it is indeed difficult to kill a strong snake man in the desert, this kind of escape skill. It is really hard to defend against. Seeing the energy giant snake running around randomly, middle-aged man, I had no choice but to smile bitterly. Hearing this, the few people next to him who were trying to kill the energy giant snake also nodded in sympathy. This weird snake skill. If it is not fully prepared, it is really impossible to intercept it. Ning Luo saw that Yue Mei had left, and he did not stay here anymore, and left here. Ning Luo returned to the place before, and Heibadong was still there waiting for them. Furukawa is coming to ****** the fire of Qinglian's heart, and it seems that his speed has increased. Ning Luo and Heibadong flew toward the depths of the snake human race, flying wildly in the air for nearly half an hour, and a huge tribal fortress slowly appeared on the distant horizon. Inside the fortress, the lights are bright, but the flickering firelight reveals something that is not peaceful. A thought flashed in his heart. Ning Luo finally came to the sky above the fortress. His eyes swept roughly among the super-large tribe with almost no end in sight, and his heart was slightly shocked. On the huge city wall that is tens of meters high, there are countless arrow towers densely covered with lavender arrow tips, revealing the arrow towers, glowing with a cold luster under the moonlight. Looking at this rigorous defense like a net of heaven and earth, Ning Luo couldn't help but wipe a cold sweat. With this strength of defense, even a big fighting master or even a fighting spirit, if it is careless, I am afraid it will be in a moment. Be shot into a hornet's nest. But although the defense of the fortress is extremely strong, but what makes Deninglo thankful is that now in this strict defense circle, a huge underground passage is forcibly destroyed, and all the arrow towers near the passage are smashed to pieces by powerful forces. Obviously, these remnants are the masterpieces of the previous group of Furukawa. He destroyed this tribe, so it happened to be cheaper for Ningluo. Maybe due to this sudden destruction. Now this huge fortress was in a panic, and with the help of this panic, Ningluo was lucky enough to pass through the fortified defense, flew in from the sky, and finally faced the fortress desperately. The other direction burst out. Flying high in the sky, Ningluo once again felt the vastness of the fortress below. If it were to talk about the area, even the largest city Ningluo had ever seen was Black Rock City. It is also difficult to compare with it. Ningluo and Haidongbo flew into the fortress immediately, but were not discovered. Ningluo and Haidongbo came to the tribe. They walked cautiously, but at this moment, above the sky, a strange roar resembling a wolf resembling a fox suddenly sounded. Listening to the roar, Ningluo's face changed sharply, and when he raised his head, he found out. Above the head, it turned out to be a strange big bird hovering in darkness, obviously. It should be a kind of warning placed on the sky by the snake man. Alarm! Alarm! There are people in the sky. The flying spearman prepares to project. Listening to the sirens sounded in the dark night, a cold loud shout suddenly came from the city wall. Hearing this command, the slightly flustered snake guards suddenly calmed down, and quickly coated the venom on their waist with flying spears, and then looked fiercely at the sky with a fierce face. Ningluo came by. I was found. With hundreds of gazes staring fiercely, Ningluo's scalp was slightly numb. At the moment, ignoring the **** bird that kept hovering above his head, the purple cloud wings vibrated rapidly, and his body suddenly changed. As a dark streamer, it blasted away on the city wall. Aim at the location of the wolf owl, shoot him down for me. On the city wall, a glamorous snake girl with a graceful appearance, looking at Ningluo in the sky with anger in her beautiful eyes, a moment later, coldly chuckled softly. As soon as the snake girl's command came down, on the city wall, hundreds of heavily armed snake men suddenly shouted, took a step back with their right foot, half turned, and then suddenly leaned forward. Suddenly, their hands were stained with venom. The spear broke through the air, and the sharp sound of the wind broke through the silent night sky. These **** human beings, when my charmed snake tribe is so bullying. I dare to break into the city again and again tonight. Sen Leng looked at the sky at Ningluo, who was covered by the spear's attack range, the glamorous snake girl gritting his silver teeth and said angrily. Furukawa and his party, who had previously played forward, broke the city forcibly because there was no strong guard in the tribe. Now Ningluo is coming single again, how can he not let this obviously not low-ranking snake girl get angry? Staring at the sky coldly, the glamorous snake girl seemed to have seen the face of dying fear. Her red lips provoked **********, waiting for the ***** feast in the void. She could clearly sense that the human being at high altitude was only at the level of a fighter, although she didn't understand why a fighter could fly. But this did not hinder the killing intent in her heart. Under such an overwhelming poisonous spear attack, a fighting master had only one end, and that was the piece of broken meat that was shot and killed on the spot. However, under the gaze of hundreds of people above the city wall, the human flying in the sky, when the poisonous spear was about to hit the body, purple flames suddenly gushed out of the body. And then, facing the overwhelming group of poisonous spears, rushed away. After an instant, under the stunned gaze of the snake man below, the flame figure rushed out of the group of death poisonous spears all the way. The body did not stay in the slightest, and flew out of the city wall like lightning, and finally disappeared quickly into the dark night. Staring blankly at the back that disappeared in an instant, the fist of the cold snake ********, the city wall slammed against the wall in front of her, and suddenly cracks spread out, horrifying the snake soldiers nearby. He tremblingly did not dare to speak. Clean up the city, repair the city walls, and immediately send information to all snake tribes nearby, and at the same time notify the leaders of the other 7 tribes, asking them to send strong men as soon as possible to encircle these despicable humans in the desert. The glamorous snake girl looked at the dark night sky, and her icy voice was full of killing intent. In the vast desert, dozens of heavily armed snakemen, armed with poisonous spears, carefully patrolled this small area with sharp eyes, and any non-snakeman creatures would be killed by them. The snake man squad interspersed with each other on patrols. Where the squad passed, there were traces of the snake's tail swinging out. These ***** humans dared to rush into the depths of the desert so arrogantly. If you catch them, you must let them taste what is called the pain of 10,000 snakes. Against the scorching sun, a seemingly leader, the snake man wiped his sweat and cursed. "Captain, what happened? Why did the clan suddenly enter martial law?" A snake man shook his tail impatiently. His eyes swept across the open desert, and he asked with some doubts. But it was dragged out early in the morning, and then searched all over the desert. Hearing this snake man's question, the dozens of snake men nearby also cast doubtful eyes on the leading snake man. Obviously, they are not very high-ranking, and they are not very clear about the whole story. What's the matter? Last night, a group of strong humans broke through the defenses of the May Snake tribe and went deep into the desert. According to the information from the May Snake tribe, there seemed to be one of those people. Do Huang, 3 Do Wang, and a few strong fighting spirits. The leader of the snake man said with a cold snorted expression. Hearing this, the expressions of the snakes around him suddenly changed. 1 Do Wang and 3 Do Wang. God, does the human empire want to go to war again? This kind of terrifying lineup, among the snake people, no large tribe can resist it alone. Now all the large and small tribes of the snake human tribe have entered the period of martial law, and according to the information I have received, the leaders of the 8 tribes have received orders from Her Majesty the Queen and have begun to rush to the temple in the center of the desert. The fastest, presumably you can arrive at night, the slowest one, maybe a day later. When talking about Her Majesty the Queen, there was a zealous piety on the face of the leader of the snake. As long as there are 3 masters rushing to the temple, then Her Majesty will order a carpet search. What if they have a fighting emperor? A group of overpowered people, just wait for the strong snake human clan to gather. After that, they must be turned into mourning dogs. The lead snake man sneered, raised his head and looked at this uninhabited desert, shook his head helplessly, and waved his hand. Yelled, "Go, change a place, there seems to be no trace of humans here." As the leader yelled, the team gradually searched the distance, leaving a large empty desert. After the team disappeared at the end of the horizon, a sand dune suddenly squirmed slightly. After a while, a figure jumped out of the sand dune with yellow sand in the sky. Both feet steadily landed on the sand, looking up at the place where the snake man team disappeared, and whispered helplessly, "It's getting more and more troublesome. Now this desert is almost every once in a while. There will be a snake patrol. But I heard what they said earlier, that the strong of the snake human race is also coming quickly, although Furukawa and their lineup cannot be underestimated, but once the strong snake human race really gathers together, I think they can only retreat." Bar. The figure raised his head slightly, revealing a delicate face under the black robe. It was the Ning Luo who forcibly broke through the May Snake tribe last night. Enter the May Snake tribe. Ning Luo and Hai Dongbo kept walking forward. At this time, they came to a city-state. "This is the headquarters of the snake people," Haibadong said directly. Ning Luo nodded and said, "The goal is too big for us to go in together. I'll go in first, and you will meet outside." Hai Dongbo nodded. Ning Luo can change at will, so he can change into a snake man, but Hai Dongbo will be recognized soon when he enters, so Ning Luo is not going to take him in. Ning Luo changed into a snake man, and then walked towards the city. He came here with some snake people. At this time, he looked at the distant sky. After a while, a small black dot suddenly appeared on the edge of the sky. In the blink of an eye, it was carrying the sharp sound of breaking wind and violence. Shoot towards the huge city. Soon after the black spot appeared, the guards on the city wall discovered it. Suddenly, with the sound of a sirens, countless snakes raised their poisonous spears high, ready to shoot them down at any time. Down. When the black ink movie was about to reach 100 meters away from the city, he suddenly stopped in the air, with a slightly cold voice, resounding, "The leader of the ink snake tribe, Mobas, see Her Majesty the Queen." Hearing this shout resounding like a rolling thunder in the desert, Ningluo's eyelids twitched slightly. One of the 8 tribes of the snake-human tribe finally arrived first. In the spacious and luxurious hall, a beautiful shadow leaned against the back of the chair, slightly tired, occasionally sweeping the purple crystal throne on the sweeping platform with a lazy look, and couldn't help but shook his head helplessly. Rubbing her smooth forehead with her slender hands, a touch of joy suddenly appeared on the pretty woman's face. She raised her head and looked outside the hall, when a black shadow shot in like lightning. "I finally came here." Seeing the black shadow entering the hall, the woman couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. "You may, what happened?" 3 martial law orders were issued in a row. "Those humans are very strong." The figure who entered the hall was obviously a male snake man, and the man was slightly sturdy. A thin shirt was casually draped over the body, and his arms were covered with strange black tattoos. When the tattoo reached the palm of his hand, it revealed 2 hideous black snake heads. The snake's head was slightly raised, as if it would break out of the body at any time, faintly revealing a fierce breath. Glancing at this male snake man who is in the clan with her own status, Yume sighed lightly, slightly straightened her waist, her plump figure was suddenly highlighted with a charming outline, and said lazily, "Very strong, I ran into them last night, and I ran away, presumably now they should be around the temple." "Oh, do you know their exact strength?" Hearing this, the male snake man's eyes shrank slightly, walked into the hall, and sat down in front of the spacious table, with a cold voice that could not be concealed. 3 fighting kings, 4 fighting spirits. Yume pursed her **** red lips, and whispered softly, "Mobas, it seems that this time it seems a bit troublesome. Why do these guys suddenly gather so many powerful people?" His face was slightly solemn, and he was called the male snake man of Mobas. Shen Sheng asked, "Have you notified Her Majesty?" "What did she say?" "I have notified, but Her Majesty seems to be very calm. Just let me send information and call you over." Yume nodded and said helplessly, "Those people suddenly came to the desert, should they have their purpose?" Mobas pondered for a while, and said with some doubts, "I confronted them once last night and listened to them. It seems that I want to find Her Majesty the Queen." Yume Xian said with interest, playing with a strand of blue silk. "Looking for Your Majesty the Queen." Hearing this, Mobas was a little surprised. Don't those human powers usually fear the Queen the most? What now? "I don't know what they want to do. Before, they couldn't even hide, but now they are trying to break their heads and squeeze in. These guys have their heads caught in the door." Yume sneered in a low voice. With furrowed brows, Mobas suddenly stood up and said, "I want to see Her Majesty the Queen. I think we should make things clear. Don't go. Her Majesty the Queen is not seeing anyone now, and I haven't even seen it before." All the words were communicated by the captain of Medusa Snake Guard Washir. Yume curled her lips and turned soft. The bone's tender body shrank in the chair. Like a lazy beauty snake. "Your Majesty the Queen has not appeared. How is this possible? This is not like the style she used to do things." Mobas frowned, and said with some doubt, "I will try." Seeing that Mobas didn't believe it, Yume hummed indifferently, just about to close her eyes. The pretty face changed abruptly, and her body suddenly sat up from the chair. Her long and narrow eyes looked at the sky outside the hall coldly, and said coldly, "Come." When Yume sensed the aura that suddenly appeared outside the city, Mobas on the side also felt it. Her face was slightly dark at the moment, and Yume glanced at each other, and then the 2 of them flashed out of the hall. His body quickly lifted into the air, and after a while, he came to the city wall that had entered a state of martial law. At this time, a few hundred meters above the city wall, a huge monster was suspended in the air, and several figures were also suspended not far in front of the monster, and those terrifying auras came from here. Exudes from a few people's bodies. The figure walks into the sky without rushing into the city. After a while, it just stopped outside the attack range of those flying spearmen on the city wall. Looking at the group of people who stopped outside the attack circle, two lights and shadows on the city wall slowly rose into the sky. The cold voice of Mobus contained a little coldness. Those who wandered above the sky. Humans, why did they trespass into our territory without consent? If you don't want to cause a war between the Gamma Empire and the Snake people, please advise where did you come from? Go back. Hehe, this must be the Mobus leader of the Black Snake tribe, right? In the crowd in the distance, the middle-aged man with extraordinary temperament walked out slowly and said with a smile. Who are you? Slightly fanning the energy wings behind him, Mobus' cold eyes swept across the middle-aged man, and he sneered. Hehe, Insha Furukawa. The middle-aged man smiled slightly without paying attention to Mobus's gaze. Furukawa, ha, it really is him. Hearing the clear voice from the sky, Ningluo, who hid himself in the cracks of the stone, suddenly let out a long sigh. The corner of his eyes glanced upwards, looking at the middle-aged man who was still talking and laughing freely even if he was facing the thousands of people. He shook his head slightly. I have to admit that this guy has something that Ningluo has to admit. The strong demeanor and arrogance. Pil King Guhei of the Gamma Empire. Hey, this name is like a thunderous ear. The two characters of Guhei also surprised de Yueme and Mobus a little, although snake people rarely become strong in humans. However, they have to pay enough attention to medicine masters like Furukawa, because they also know very well what kind of calling power a medicine master like Furukawa possesses. Hehe, the two chiefs came to the nobleman, just want to talk to Queen Medusa. I wonder if you can ask Her Majesty to show up. Furukawa smiled politely. See Her Majesty, I'm sorry, we can't convey this request for you. Shook his head, Mobus refused without hesitation, raised his eyelids, and said faintly, Furukawa, you still take someone as soon as possible. Leave, people from my 8 tribes are already rushing towards the temple. You should know what some of them hate your humans. So, I am afraid that even if you want to leave, you won't have the chance. Hey, Lao He, your temper has always been the same. What nonsense with them, just smash the city directly to him. See that the woman can't get out. Yan Shi on the side listened to Mobus's words. Could not help but step forward and laughed tauntingly. Ha, who did I say? It turned out to be you, a stupid lion full of muscles. Looking at Yan Shi coldly, Mobus sneered, looking at his expression. It seems that I still know Yan Shi. Hey, you, a rotten snake with a black paint all over, doesn't seem to be much better, right? If it wasn't for you to slip fast back then, your leader of the Ink Snake tribe would have to be replaced. Yan Shi grinned, smiled and said, I don't know how many years have you grown. How much have you grown? You can come and try. Mobus's slightly sharp pupils swept across a few cold lights, and said abruptly. Okay, old lion, don't quarrel with them. Looking at the enemy, they were extremely jealous. Furukawa shook his head helplessly, waved his hand to stop Yan Shi from scolding, his eyes swept across the city, and he let out a sigh of relief, and the sound of screaming was carried by the vindictiveness and it spread throughout the city. Your Majesty Queen Medusa, in the ancient river of the Lower Gamma Empire, I did not come here to fight the nobles. I just have something to talk to you, please be able to show up. Seeing Furukawa's actions, both Yueme and Mobus on the wall frowned slightly, but they did not stop them. In this case, Her Majesty's appearance is indeed better. If the opponent really wants to use force, only can't eat and walk around in the underground. Booming shouting was tumbling in the city, after a while. Only then gradually stopped. As the shouting subsided, there was silence inside and outside the city wall. After a while, there was still no reaction at all. Seeing this situation, Furukawa's brows also wrinkled slightly. At high altitude, the space suddenly twisted strangely. Looking at this scene, Furukawa was slightly surprised, except for the silent black-robed man. They all took a small step back, and then solemnly looked at the twisted space. Above the sky, the afterglow of the setting sun shone down, shining on the distorted space, and in the next instant, a graceful curved body slowly appeared under the gaze of countless people. The beautiful woman who appeared suddenly, dressed in a graceful purple brocade robe, the body under the brocade robe, plump and exquisite, like the mature peach, permeated with a touch of charm, with a head of 3,000 green silk. Casually draped down from the fragrant shoulders, between the slender willow waist, and under the brocade robe, a purple snake tail was exposed. The snake tail swayed slightly, a wild enchanting temptation, making the person feel a little inexplicable. Piping hot. Ning Luo's gaze swept across the almost perfect body, and finally stayed on that beautiful face, and suddenly her heart trembled fiercely. Seeing this woman with his own eyes, Ning Luo finally understood a little bit why many people near the desert would say that Queen Medusa's famous name is comparable to her fierce name. Ding! Detect the goddess Queen Medusa, interact with Queen Medusa, and get the opportunity to sign in. The sound of the system suddenly sounded. Ning Luo knew very well in her heart that Queen Medusa is so beautiful, she must be one of her goddesses. For this kind of woman, it seems that only the words glamorous are used to describe it, but under the glamorous touch, there is a touch of empress-like nobility and grace. This charming temperament made Deninglo suddenly think of the beautiful women in the Warcraft Mountains who dared to fight against the amethyst-winged Lion King. They all have this graceful temperament in a high position. As expected to be Queen Medusa, she is really beautiful, Ning Luo secretly said. Ning Luo wanted to interact with Queen Medusa, but she was a fighting sect. He had the day to drive the beasts to suppress it for hundreds of years, but Ning Luo didn't know whether he could suppress the fighting sect realm. Queen Medusa is very beautiful. Compared with her, Yu Mei, who once surprised Ning Luo a little bit, seemed a bit bleak. Your Majesty the Queen. After this coquettish woman appeared, on the city wall below, a group of black snake men suddenly knelt down, with a respectful voice, and broke through the clouds. Looking at Queen Medusa who appeared above the sky, the cold-faced Mobas, a touch of drunkenness and deep admiration flashed across his eyes. Is she the Queen of Medusa whose fierce name almost stunned several empires near the desert? Looking at the charming purple-robed beauty in the sky, Ning Luo let out a sigh of relief and murmured. Looking at the Medusa Queen who appeared in the sky, Furukawa and the Yan Lion who spoke like thunder, they all involuntarily took a step closer to the silent black-robed man. Here, only it is possible for her to contend with Queen Medusa, who has frightened the Gamma Empire. Are you looking for me? Above the sky, Queen Medusa lowered her head slightly, looking at Furukawa, her red lips raised a slender curve. In a flash, her delicate face was suddenly enchanted, and she was so surprised that she smiled and smiled. The few fighting spirit powerhouses beside Furukawa were momentarily absent-minded. Under Queen Medusa's smiling gaze, Furukawa took a breath, suppressed some of the emotions in his heart, raised his head, and said with a smile, Your Majesty Queen Medusa, it's an honor to meet you. I'm Ja the ancient river of the Ma Empire. Pil King Guhei, right. I have heard that the 6th rank alchemist is extraordinary, and he can still invite so many powerful people. Queen Medusa glanced over the mysterious black-robed man on the side and smiled. Let's talk. What's the matter with me? Although your actions to forcefully enter my clan are extremely rude, but my snake-human clan is not an unreasonable race. Looking at the Furukawa who seemed to be quietly relieved, Queen Medusa Chushui passed a sly in her eyes, and whispered softly, Also, the name of King Pil King Guhei alchemist is known as the Jama Empire. As long as you pledge anything at that time, you can compensate for this small loss. Am I right, Master Furukawa? The smile on his face was a little embarrassing, but fortunately, Furukawa is also a well-informed person, and now he is quite arrogant, waved his hand proudly, and laughed. Forcibly entered the nobleman, we are indeed rude. Furukawa should compensate for these losses. Hey, Master Furukawa is really magnificent. Yusho covered her red lips and smiled lightly. Queen Medusa blinked her slender eyelashes and chuckled. Master Furukawa, you still invite so many friends. It took such a big setback to come to my snake clan, what is it? Hearing the conversation gradually came to the point, Furukawa's face also appeared solemn, slightly silent. Regarding the words, don't look at the appearance of the Queen Medusa smiling in front of him. It seems that humans and animals are harmless, but he knows that when the snake-human tribe fought against the Gamma Empire, this coquettish and beautiful woman, but 3 of them fought on the spot. Spirit-level powerhouses blasted into the sky full of meat sauce, the methods are fierce. It is enough to make people who often lick blood on the knife edge feel terrified. Furthermore, Furukawa also knew that the strength of Queen Medusa was at the level of Emperor Do. That is also one of the top existences. If it weren't for the Gamma Empire with 3 fighting emperors, I'm afraid no one would be able to defeat them alone. Slowly exhaled, Furukawa raised his head, looking at Queen Medusa in the sky, and said in a deep voice, I'm going on this trip. It's mainly for the strange fire obtained by Her Majesty. Guhei's deep sound echoed slowly in the sky, making the already calm surroundings suddenly quieter. Ha, this guy really came for the Qinglian heart fire. Among the rocks below, Ning Luo sighed softly and smiled bitterly. Different fire. When did Her Majesty get such a thing as strange fire? Hearing Furukawa's words, Mobas and Ueme were empty on the wall. All were stunned. Obviously, none of them knew about the fact that Queen Medusa obtained the heart of Qinglian from outside Rock Desert City half a year ago. What does your queen do when you go down to make a strange fire? He blinked blankly. After a while, it seemed that something had occurred, and Yume's expression changed drastically. She turned her head abruptly and glanced at Mobas, and whispered in horror, could it be? It should be, otherwise Her Majesty the Queen won't spend so much time looking for the strange fire. Except for what she intends to do, there should be no other purpose. Taking a light breath, Mobas whispered. But, oh my god, but the failure rate of that thing is extremely high. If there is an accident to Her Majesty, then we snake human clan. Yume shook her hands in front of her and said with a wry smile. Oh, Her Majesty has stayed at the Duhuang level for many years, maybe she is a little impatient, although she doesn't seem to care much about it on weekdays. But I know that she really wants to be stronger, because once she reaches the Dozong level, then the power of the snake people will expand rapidly, and there will be no need to be trapped in this vast desert in the future. Although after so many years of adaptation, we snake people are not suitable for this place. After all, our blood is cold. Mobas sighed lightly. Ueme also sighed lightly, raised her head, and cast a wry smile on the pretty face in the midair that gradually transformed from a smile into the indifferent Queen Medusa. Different fire. How did you know that I got the news of the strange fire? Queen Medusa's delicate fingers crossed the blue silk hanging in front of her forehead, slightly leaning toward the beautiful purple eyes, flashing a little bit of chill. Half a year ago, I happened to be looking for a medicinal material in the desert. I happened to sense the smell of a different fire. I tracked it all the way. Although I didn't find Her Majesty the Queen's figure, I picked up a few ***** colorful pieces on the way. Snake scale. Colorful snake scales. Only when Her Majesty the Queen is fighting with all her strength, will they appear on the strange scales on the body's surface. Moreover, on the snake scales, we have also detected the smell of strange fire. Was it hurt by it when it was on fire? Furukawa said softly. Queen Medusa lightly licked her ruddy lips, a pair of strange pupils, staring at Furukawa closely, a faint chill lingered in them. As if perceiving the unpleasant taste in Queen Medusa's eyes, Furukawa cautiously stepped back behind the black-robed man and said with a wry smile, Your Majesty, I don't mean anything else. How important is alien fire to an alchemist? Her Majesty also knows that in order to find the strange fire, I have almost traveled to many strange places in the Gamma Empire. The blood of snakes is cold, and the different fires do not have much effect on you, so I hope Her Majesty the Queen can let me use other items to exchange for different fires from your hands. Quote. Exchange. After hearing this, Queen Medusa provoked a light sarcasm in the corner of her eyes, and smiled lightly. Since you are an alchemist, you naturally know the power of alien fire better than me. You said, this kind of things. What do you need to come up with to be worthy of its value? His brows were slightly furrowed. Furukawa pondered for a long time. His face rarely felt painful. He raised his head and said in a deep voice, I am willing to use 2 6th-rank Doling pills, a 7th-rank transforming pill in exchange for abnormal fire. I wonder what Your Majesty the Queen thinks. Furukawa just blurted out. The Yanshi and the others around him stared at Furukawa in amazement, and even the black-robed man on the side turned his head slightly. A stunned look was shot from the black robe. Presumably, she did not expect that Furukawa would have made such a big shot because of the strange fire. 6th-rank Doling pill, this is a kind of pill that can make the strongest fighting king jealous. The effect of this pill is simple, but it is greedy because of its effect. It is able to make the Duwang level powerhouses who subdue it, and live up to a star. That is to say, if a 2-star Do Wang takes the Doling pill, then he will be able to become a 3-star Do Wang in just a few days. You know, at the level of Duwang, the gap between each star is extremely huge. Many king fighters, after years of hard training, still stop at a certain star. This kind of thing is not uncommon. This shows how precious the Douling pill is. Of course, although the effect of Douling Dan is extremely eye-catching, but it is extremely resistant. As long as the person who has taken the second Douling pill, it basically lost the effect to him, that is to say, a Douwang can only take one Douling pill in his life. However, even so, Douling pill is also the most eye-catching elixir of the strong class. In order to obtain a Douling pill, countless people are even willing to pay a huge price. Compared with the 6th rank Douling pill, the 7th rank Hua Xing pill is even more sluggish. This pill is enough to drive countless Duhuang level beasts into madness, because as long as they have one pill, they can completely escape from the animal body, and from then on have the long life of the beasts and the talents of human cultivation. These two special effects, the superposition of the thing created, may be a legendary powerhouse who can become Dozong and even Do Sacred Land. The two things that Furukawa brought out almost reached the point where some people were crazy. It's no wonder that Yanshi and the others in the vicinity felt a little weird. Ning Luo slightly raised his head and looked at the two Yuemei and Yuemei on the wall. Obviously, the two of them were also taken aback by the price quoted by Furukawa, with a surprised expression on their faces, and they looked quite funny. His gaze gradually shifted to Queen Medusa, who was high in the sky. Ning Luo tightened his fist slightly, and whispered, "I wonder if she will agree." Everyone who had the same idea as Ning Luo, including Furukawa, also focused their nervous eyes on the silent Queen Medusa, waiting for her to speak. Being watched by countless gazes, above the sky, Queen Medusa was silent for a long time, sighed lightly, pursing her **** red lips. Her beautiful eyes looked at Furukawa with a little regret, and said helplessly, "I have to admit, your conditions are very attractive, but sorry, I still won't exchange with you." Listening to Queen Medusa's words that represent rejection, many people are stunned. Although the power of the alien fire is extremely large, it does not seem to be very attractive to the snake people, right? After all, relative to their cold blood, this violent and extremely destructive thing like fire is like fire and water, and it is absolutely incompatible. Therefore, when the Queen Medusa heard the words of rejection with a little regret, Furukawa and the powerful men such as Yanshi and Feng Liao had their faces full of sorrow. This woman's head is broken. Why is she keeping a strange fire that is of little use to her? It's better to exchange something useful to her. Isn't this a win-win situation? Yanshi shook his head helplessly, whispering in confusion. Muttered. Aside, Windrunner Feng Li also shook his head slightly, his face full of incomprehension. Compared with their mistakes, the empty moon on the wall and MOBAs were much calmer. After Queen Medusa's refusal, they completely understood what she wanted to do. Well, as expected, Her Majesty seems to really want to do that. Otherwise, she would not simply refuse this kind of exchange. With a light sigh, Yume said softly. MOBAs nodded softly, and there was a touch of worry and bitterness on the vulture's face. But Ning Luo knew that Queen Medusa wanted to advance to the fighting sect with the help of different fires. At that time, Queen Medusa could transform her form even if she didn't need a transforming pill. And if she advances to become a Dozong, their snake-human tribe doesn't need to be in this land of yellow sand. High above the sky, Furukawa's current face was quickly converged, frowning and looking at Queen Medusa in the distance. Sighed lightly and said, "Your Majesty, your refusal is really beyond my expectations. I don't like to cover up, so I exchanged terms earlier. Are the most precious things I can take out. I thought they could impress Her Majesty the Queen, but unfortunately, I seem to be miscalculating." Quote, "Master Furukawa, your condition really touches my heart. But for some reason, the fire is very important to me now." On the pretty face of Queen Medusa, regret is also undisguised. Obviously, she was not indifferent to what Furukawa brought out. Furukawa sighed, the expression on his face was rather depressed. He knew very well that if Queen Medusa didn't want to exchange strange fires, then based on the strength of people like them, it was absolutely impossible to force her to intimidate her. "Can you tell me, why do you want to leave the strange fire so much?" Furukawa smiled bitterly. "Sorry, no." She shook her head slightly, and Queen Medusa waved lazily, and said faintly, "Forget it. Master Furukawa, where did you come from? Let's go back. As for the mysterious compensation, there is no need to leave here early. The leaders of the 8 tribes of my snake-human tribe are already rushing here. Some of them are very disgusting with you humans, so you should leave as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary trouble." Quote. Listening to Queen Medusa's words, Furukawa sighed with a wry smile, turned his head to look at the companions, his face full of helplessness. "Lao he, just left." Yan Shi glanced at Queen Medusa in the distance and frowned. "What else can I do if I don't leave? You don't know what the strength of Queen Medusa is. If you grab it, do you think it is possible?" Furukawa sighed. After hearing Furukawa's words, Yan Shi and Feng Li were also slightly stagnant. With their strengths, it was naturally impossible to challenge Queen Medusa. At this moment, a strong fighting spirit next to them suddenly walked out. Do Ling wears a black cloak, and no one can see his face clearly. At the beginning, Furukawa recruited this strong fighting spirit through a list of solicitations, so Furukawa didn't know much about this strong fighting spirit. "Hee, just a mere energy body scared you like this," said the black-robed man Do Ling. Seeing Yan Shi's actions, Furukawa also cast his eyes on the black-robed man, waiting for her to speak. As soon as these words came out, everyone was extremely surprised, and looked at this strong fighting spirit. Under the gaze of everyone, after a while, the black robe moved slightly, and the figure slowly took a step forward. The black robe slightly lifted up and smiled and said, "I once saw a piece about the queen of the snake-human tribe once in a while on an ancient book. The news, the above said, if it was when Queen Medusa reached the peak of Do Huang. If the chance is enough, there will be a bizarre evolution. After the evolution, Queen Medusa can not only transform into a human body freely. Moreover, the strength will be promoted as a matter of course, but the success rate of this kind of evolution seems to be quite low, and, the most important thing is that this kind of evolution is necessary as the different fire. I think, Her Majesty the Queen doesn't want to exchange the alien fire, should it be the idea to use the alien fire to evolve?" The black-robed man tilted his head slightly and said flatly. Hearing the words from the black-robed man's mouth, Queen Medusa's face changed slightly. The enchanting pupils stared at the black-robed man closely, and the chill lingered in them, and said softly, "I didn't expect you to know these things. It really surprised me. I think you should be more than a fighting spirit." Quote. "You are right, and not only do I know that you need a different fire to complete the evolution, I also know that you are just an energy body with a few thoughts on Queen Medusa. I think, really Queen Medusa. It should be preparing for evolution somewhere, right?" The black-robed man said lightly. The words of the black-robed man uttered. Everyone on both sides was slightly shocked, and Yumei's expressions changed drastically. They looked at each other, and they all saw a touch of worry in each other's eyes. "You said that the current Queen Medusa is just an energy body." Yan Shi pointed to the Queen Medusa in the distance, with a surprised expression on his face. In his perception, he did not seem to find anything wrong. "What?" "Yeah." The black-robed man nodded slightly, lifted his feet lightly, and stepped on quietly. His figure suddenly disappeared. At the moment when the black-robed man disappeared, Queen Medusa's pretty face changed slightly in the distance. Just about to leave, a dark shadow appeared behind her in an instant, with her palm poking out, as if anxiously slowly. It fell on the back of Queen Medusa. Bold. Looking at the black-robed man who flashed his hands in that instant, Yumei and Mobiza's expressions changed drastically, and the energy behind them fluttered, and they rushed toward the black-robed man. "Hey, don't intervene indiscriminately." 2 shadows flashed past. In the middle of the journey, Yan Shi and Feng Li stopped them. Above the sky, the atmosphere that was originally a harmonious atmosphere suddenly became tense. Ignoring the surrounding behavior, the black-robed man leaned forward slightly, looking at the stiff Queen Medusa in front of him, and whispered, "Am I right?" "Your Majesty. Your Excellency is not a Do Ling, so I can see through my energy clone so quickly." The long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly, and Queen Medusa smiled lightly, calmly, without any panic of being restrained. "Presumably Her Majesty's current body should not be disturbed. Otherwise, we won't be allowed to be so presumptuous. It's a good opportunity." The black-robed man smiled slightly, his palms trembled suddenly, the violent energy broke out, and the heavy bombardment hit the Queen Medusa's back vest. Suddenly, with a slight muffled sound, the enchanting Meadow in midair Queen Shaw turned into a lavender smoke, slowly lifted into the air and dissipated. Are you from the soul race? Queen Medusa was suddenly shocked. Looking at the black-robed man, she couldn't believe it. People from the soul race. Ning Luo was very surprised. He didn't know why the soul race people came here, but the soul race people came here, there must be nothing good. The soul race and the ancient race have always been enemies, so Ning Luo is not cold to the soul race people. But now, Ning Luo wants to win the heart of Qinglian. He doesn't have much time to control the soul race people. The more they make trouble, it will benefit him. As for the Snake Clan, it is still King Dan Guhei. What does it have to do with him? Let them fight with each other and be fishermen by themselves. The battle in the sky continues. At the moment when the black-robed man smashed Queen Medusa's energy body away, the faces of Yume and Mobus surged with rage. The latter suddenly turned his head and shouted at the countless guards on the wall below, "Kill these humans." Hearing the order of Mobus, the wall of the city immediately responded to a loud shout of anger. Numerous snake men clasped the poisonous spear in their hands. After 2 steps back quickly, they rushed forward, and the poisonous spear in their hands dropped out of their hands. Suddenly, above the sky, a shower of poisonous spears crushed in darkness, shooting at the black-robed man and Furukawa and others not far away. The sharp breaking wind made people's ears faintly hurt. Faintly looking at the huge shower of poisonous spears in the sky, the figure of the black robe did not move at all. With a light wave of the sleeve robe, a huge cyan tornado suddenly appeared in front of him, the cyan tornado. Rotating at high speed, the yellow sand on the ground was dragged into it continuously. Looking at the ever-increasing tornado storm, the black-robed man seemed to drive away mosquitoes, waving his hands casually, and suddenly, a powerful tornado storm swept out, and the overwhelming poisonous spear showers were also distributed by the storm. The fierce suction that came out was devastating, and the poisonous spear that occasionally penetrated the storm, it was difficult to cause any threat to the Furukawa and others behind. A pair of eyes under the black robe stared at the waves of poisonous spears that were continuously thrown from above the city wall, letting the storm stop them, turning around slightly, looking at Furukawa and others, and said faintly, "Break in, Queen Medusa must be at a critical moment right now. She is extremely vulnerable at this time. If you want to get a strange fire, this is your only chance." "Why are you helping us?" Furukawa asked suspiciously. "Because we need you," the black-robe man said coldly. Hearing this, Furukawa frowned slightly. After pondering for a moment, he nodded solemnly. He is not the kind of mother-in-law. It is time to be decisive and never let a fleeting opportunity slip away because of those boring moral issues. "Old Lion, Feng Li, come on, you can help stop the 2 of Mobas. I will enter the city to look for the strange fire," Furukawa said with a sudden wave of his palm. "Hey, since you said that, let's do it. Anyway, you are a big man. The more injured you are, the more generous you will be paid." Yan Shi grinned and laughed. Hear the words. Furukawa shook his head, his body trembled slightly, huge wings of vindictiveness slowly emerged from his back, the soles of his feet touched the void, and his body was the first to shoot away into the city. "Stop me." Furukawa's behavior was seen. The Yume and Mobston on the wall flashed over, blocking them down with a gloomy face. "Hey, your opponent is us." The fierce breaking wind and energy broke through the air, and smashed at the 2 Yume. Quickly dodges the attack of strength. Yan Shi and Fengli quickly flashed in front of Yume and they intercepted them with a smile. "Medusa Snake Guard, stop him." Seeing that Furukawa wanted to rush into the city directly, Yume's pretty face was slightly cold, and she turned her head and shouted coldly at the city wall. "Yes," the neat voice responded coldly, and then a dozen lights and shadows, with the help of the height of the city wall, intercepted Furukawa like lightning. "Kill him." A dozen snake men with slightly weird costumes. His eyes were as cold as a poisonous snake, staring at Furukawa. With a cold drink, more than a dozen people flashed their bodies almost at the same time, and their ferocious energy began to merge with each other as they flew into the air, and with the strange fusion of their energy. The energy contained in it. It is also exponentially soaring. Looking at the attack of a dozen snake men with a calm expression, Furukawa just took a cursory sweep. It is to clearly distinguish their strengths. 2 fighting spirits and a dozen or so great fighting masters. At this level, even if they have the weird combo technique that can increase their attack power, this is for Furukawa, it is still too far. The palms opened and closed, and the light blue flames instantly engulfed Furukawa's body. The wings on his back vibrated slightly, and his hands formed a knot of lightning like lightning, and he whispered, "Lan Yan is overwhelming." As the shout fell, a light blue flame suddenly appeared in front of Furukawa, and between his waves, he shot away at a dozen snake men, and the previous dozens of snake men coned. Energetic energy, under the light blue flame, turned into nothingness. Wings shook slightly, and his stature passed through the defenses of a dozen snake men like lightning. Between his hands stretched out, his energy shot secretly. Suddenly, a dozen snake men vomited blood and retreated. Repelling the person blocking the road at the fastest speed, Furukawa just wanted to rush into the city, and his face was so fierce as to change his face, and he shot from below fiercely. The wings vibrated and his body retreated sharply, and only then could he avoid a snake spear that was flying in. Captain Medusa Snake Guard, Flower Snake. A graceful body flashed over the sky, and the woman shouted coldly. King Do. Ha, there are a lot of strong people in the snake human race. Looking at the woman who appeared in front of him, Furukawa slightly sensed the strength of the other party, and suddenly sighed helplessly in his heart. The woman on the opposite side didn't seem to have the intention of chatting with Furukawa. She pulled the sharp snake spear with one hand, and the snake's tail swayed in the void, and she rushed towards Furukawa with fierce and unparalleled energy. However, just when Furukawa was about to set off to face the battle, the black-robed man suddenly flashed out and said faintly, "Leave her to me, you go find a different fire. We don't have much time. Once Queen Medusa evolves, if you think we can only run as far as possible." Furukawa nodded hurriedly when he could see the black-robed man in front of him, and after a warning, he swept into the city like a lightning in Washiei's angry eyes. Ningluo watched the battle in the sky. He took advantage of the chaos and sneaked toward the center of the hall. Walked into the hall, and then he felt the throb of a strange fire. He knew that the strange fire must be inside. When there was chaos on the city wall, no one noticed. A shadow slipped in from outside the city wall. On the way, after solving a few snake men I met occasionally, he spread his legs and rushed in. In this huge city, Ningluo stalked for about 10 minutes, and his vision suddenly became clear. A small clear lake appeared in the eyes. In the middle of the lake, there is a small island. The surrounding water was sparkling, and there was no bridge leading to it. Standing on the edge of the lake, Ningluo glanced at the crystal clear lake water, licked his lips, and slightly flapped his wings behind his back. But when his body had just entered the lake surface for about 1 meter, a strange energy was to send his body slam into the lake water. When the body was about to be contaminated with the lake water, he tapped his toes lightly on it, and with the help of this buoyancy, his body violently shot back against the surface of the lake. Standing on the edge of the lake, Ningluo looked at the clear water, gritted his teeth fiercely, then closed his eyes, puffed, and jumped down. Her body burst into the clear lake like a fish. Ningluo glanced at the purple flame outside her body and couldn't help swallowing. At this time, under the strange temperature of the purple fire, the surrounding lake water was already rolling like boiling water, and while the white blisters were constantly bulging, strands of dark purple liquid that were hard to detect by the naked eye slowly emerged. But when these deep purple liquids were about to come into contact with the white flames, they were frozen by the cold flames of the bone spirits into tiny ice strands, and then slowly fell into the bottom of the lake. Looking at the little purple ice silks that kept emerging all over, Ningluo's scalp was a little numb. He didn't expect that this seemingly peaceful lake would hide so much deadly venom in secret. Ningluo flicked his feet, and his head came to the surface. Looking at the small island in the center of the lake, he sighed lightly, and then quickly moved his arms, bringing out a water mark on his body, gradually approaching the lake. Steadily rowed all the way to a position close to the small island in the center of the lake, and just as Ningluo was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the calm lake in front suddenly burst into water. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.